Chapter 2347. Kill Yi Xian? Xian Tian thought he heard wrong and he asked hurriedly, Kill Yi Xian? Zhuan nodded, yes. Not only will I kill Yi Xian, but I'll destroy the Celestial Treasure Pavilion as well. Xian Tian fell silent. Zhuan wanted to say something but Xian Tian suddenly said, Let me think about it. Zhuan was slightly stunned and then he said, Think about it? Xian Tian nodded and then he turned around and left. Zhu and Qin Gu glanced at each other and they were slightly dazed. Xian Tian went straight to the Celestial Treasure Pavilion after he left. Xian Tian cupped his fists towards Xiao Lan at the entrance of the pavilion. President Xiao, please notify young Master Yi that I have something to report to him, something extremely important. Xiao Lan glanced at Xian Tian and then he turned around and left. A short while later Xiao Lan stopped before Xian Tian. Go in. Xiao Lan hurriedly said, Thank you. As soon as he finished speaking he vanished on the spot. Xian Tian arrived before Yi Xian and he bowed deeply to Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, I want to make a report. Yi Xian looked at Xian Tian with slight surprise. Report? Xian Tian nodded and then he hurriedly told him about the Qin clan and Zhu clan. As soon as he finished speaking Xian Tian looked carefully at Yi Xian, and he was quite perturbed at this moment. Yi Xian fell silent for a short while and then he looked at Xian Tian. Why didn't you agree to them? Xian Tian's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly bowed respectfully. I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare. Yi Xian smiled. You don't have to be so nervous. Actually, you could have agreed to them. Xian Tian was stunned, and then he hesitated for a moment before he said, Young Master Yi wants me to be a spy? Yi Xian nodded. Xian Tian immediately said, Understood. As soon as he spoke he left silently. Yi Xian said softly, The Qin clan and the ancient clan. At this moment 2 old men suddenly appeared on the scene. The 2 old men bowed slightly to Yi Xian and then disappeared quietly. The Eastern Depot Divine Guards. These 2 people were hidden in the dark, protecting his safety at all times. At this moment the Celestial Treasure City was on high alert, and the experts from the Celestial Treasure Pavilion had rushed back. Xiao Lan and Fu Yi were still worried. Since the other party dared to target Yi Xian and the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, they must be very powerful. They had to be careful. In the starry sky Yi Xian suddenly stood up and walked out. Xiao Lan and Fu Yi were standing guard outside. Yi Xian glanced at them and then he smiled. Get ready, we're going to the Qin clan. Both Fu Yi and Fu Yi were stunned. At this moment Yi Xian had already walked into the distance. Fu Yi hesitated for a moment before saying, Young Master Yi, we should wait here for the pavilion master to arrive. As far as he was concerned, the current situation should be dealt with after Qin Guan arrived because he didn't know what sort of power was targeting the Celestial Treasure Pavilion and Yi Xian. Yi Xian turned to look at Fu Yi and smiled. I don't like to be passive. I like to take the initiative. Fu Yi hesitated to speak. Yi Xian smiled. Why do I feel like all of you don't really listen to Qin Guan? Isn't Qin Guan too benevolent? Fu Yi's expression changed drastically when he heard this and he hurriedly bowed respectfully. Young Master Yi, please don't be angry. I was wrong. He naturally understood what Yi Xian meant. Qin Guan had said before he left that he would listen to Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. Don't be nervous, I'm just saying. Now bring all the ancient God realm experts and leave with me. As soon as he finished speaking he turned around and vanished into the horizon. Fu Yi didn't hesitate any longer and he immediately led all the ancient God realm experts that were hiding in the dark and vanished into the horizon. Qin clan. Qin clan. They'd established a world by themselves and it was called the Qin world. In the current universe, the Qin clan could be considered to be a large clan because they had ancient God realm experts. Yi Xian and Fu Yi had just arrived at the Qin clan when a few dozen powerful auras assaulted them. The ancient God realm. Yi Xian waved his right hand lightly, and then a ray of sword light flew out and instantly swept through the sky. At this moment, the entire sky was obliterated by this ray of sword light. A few dozen auras were instantly obliterated. At the same time a few dozen shrill cries resounded from afar, and then a few dozen bloody heads slowly floated down from the sky. It was an extremely bloody scene. Fu Yi took a deep glance at Yi Xian when he witnessed this scene, and he was extremely shocked in his heart. Yi Xian's strength had slightly exceeded his expectations. Meanwhile, the Qin clan's patriarch Qin Gu suddenly appeared before Yi Xian and the others. Qin Gu gazed at Yi Xian and was about to speak when a sword suddenly appeared in front of him. Qin Gu's pupils constricted, and he roared furiously as he raised his arms to block. Bang! Qin Gu was blasted back and then another sword arrived. Qin Gu was horrified in his heart. He suddenly clenched his right hand into a fist, and then he suddenly smashed it forward. Rumble! A strand of terrifying energy erupted like a volcano that had been accumulating for 10,000 years, and the space in the surroundings warped at this moment. Bang! The ray of sword light shattered and Qin Gu retreated explosively once more. However, another sword arrived. One strike followed the other. Qin Gu's pupils instantly constricted to the size of needles when he saw this attack. Bang! Along with the explosion of the ray of sword light, Qin Gu retreated 30 kilometers away. As soon as he stopped moving, his body split apart and blood sprayed out. But right at this moment, another sword arrived. Qin Gu suddenly roared furiously. He opened his palm and an enormous golden shield appeared before him. Rumble! Qin Gu and the shield were blasted 30 kilometers away. As soon as Qin Gu stopped moving, he hurriedly said, "I have something to say." Hiss. A ray of sword light suddenly pierced through the space in front of him and slashed straight towards his face. Qin Gu's pupils constricted and he used the shield to block before him once more. Bang! The shield shattered and Qin Gu was blasted flying once more. This time his body was blasted apart at the instant he was blasted flying. At the instant his body was blasted apart, a sword suddenly pierced through the space between his brows and nailed him on the spot. The surroundings fell silent. Fu Yi took a deep and long glance at Yi Xian and he was shocked to the extreme. This young Master Ye's strength is simply terrifying. Qin Gu spoke with a trembling voice. "You..." He hadn't finished speaking when a sword suddenly pierced through his throat, and it caused his voice to stop abruptly. Yi Xian gazed at Qin Gu and shook his head. "I don't like listening to your nonsense." As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and Sword Zong suddenly appeared in his grasp. In the next moment, Sword Zong trembled violently, and then a ray of blood-red light appeared. In an instant, a monstrous aura and killing intent swept out. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed. Qin Gu gazed at Yi Xian while his eyes were filled with astonishment. He wanted to speak but he was unable to say a word. Meanwhile, Yi Xian flicked his sleeve. Sword Zong carried an expanse of blood-red energy as it swept down from the sky. In the next moment, Sword Zong entered the Qin clan. Rumble! A sea of blood suddenly erupted from beneath the Qin clan, and in an instant, countless shrill cries resounded. Seeing this scene, the expressions of Fu Yi and the others instantly changed. This young Master Yi actually wanted to annihilate their clan. On the other side, Qin Gu's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets as his body trembled violently. In next to no time, the entire Qin world started to shatter into pieces. Not only was his race exterminated, but he was also going to destroy his realm. Below, Zongjian went berserk, madly absorbing the blood qi. After a moment, Yi Xian looked at Qin Gu. He opened his palm and the Zongjian sword appeared in his hand. At this moment, the Zongjian sword looked as if it was made of fresh blood. It was a terrifying red. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Let's go." With that, he turned around and left. Fu Yi suddenly said, "Young Master Yi, are we not going to kill this Qin Gu?" Yi Xian stopped. He turned around to look at Qin Gu and smiled. "Do you know why I didn't kill you?" Qin Gu looked at Yi Xian with hatred, but his heart was relieved. As long as he didn't die, he would have a chance. Yi Xian laughed. "I'm just teasing you." As soon as he finished speaking, a sword pierced through the space between Qin Gu's eyebrows. Yi Xian turned around and left. Behind him, Qin Gu's soul was fading away bit by bit. Yi Xian didn't directly erase him. Instead, he let him die slowly. Let him experience the feeling of the arrival of death. Behind him, Qin Gu roared madly. At this moment, a white light suddenly enveloped Qin Gu. In the next moment, Qin Gu, whose soul was about to disappear, was forcefully protected by this white light. Yi Xian and the others stopped. Yi Xian turned around and saw a masked man standing not far away from him. Ninth Young Master. And behind this ninth Young Master, there were 12 ancient God Realm experts. Seeing this scene, Fu Yi's expression changed drastically. Ninth Young Master looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Young Master Yi, it's not good to exterminate an entire clan at the drop of a hat. After all, killing too many people will cause a backlash. Yi Xian smiled. You're the person behind them? Ninth young master nodded. Yes. Yi Xian sized up ninth young master and then he shook his head. How ugly. Everyone was speechless. Qin Gu suddenly roared furiously. Yi Xian. You annihilated my Qin clan. You. Ninth young master suddenly smiled. Patriarch Qin Gu, don't be angry. He annihilated your Qin clan, so annihilate his entire clan. Yi Xian sized up ninth young master and smiled. Annihilate my entire clan? Ninth young master chuckled. What? Is it very difficult? Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, if you want to annihilate me alone, then I think you have a chance. But if you want to annihilate my entire clan, I'm afraid it's quite difficult. Ninth young master grinned. Difficult? Young Master Yi, I can tell you responsibly that it's not difficult at all. Yi Xian immediately gave him a thumbs up and said seriously, I respect you for being a man. Ninth young master chuckled, then he opened his fan and waved it lightly. Why? Do you think I don't have the ability? Yi Xian nodded. Ninth young master laughed. Young Master Yi, since I dare to go against Immortal Treasure Pavilion, then it proves that I'm not afraid of Immortal Treasure Pavilion at all. Since I'm not even afraid of Immortal Treasure Pavilion, why would I be afraid of you? As he spoke he shook his head and smiled. Young Master Yi, have you heard of the story of a frog at the bottom of a well? Yi Xian glanced at ninth young master and didn't speak. Ninth young master continued. A frog at the bottom of a well thinks that the sky is only as big as the mouth of the well. Don't you think it's ridiculous? Of course it's ridiculous because it's at the bottom of the well. As he spoke, the corner of his mouth raised slightly. Young Master Yi, do you think you're that frog? Yi Xian glanced at the 2 storage rings on ninth young master's hand. He didn't speak and no one knew what he was thinking. Recently I've been a little poor. P.S. Yesterday I drank 2 cups of wine. I suddenly thought what would happen if I were to drink more. Thus I wanted to give it a try today. But after thinking about it I admit I'm a little scared. Chapter 23:48. Just as the ninth young master was about to say something, Yi Xian suddenly made his move. The sword arrived. It was an extremely fast sword strike. When Yi Xian made his move, the ninth young master narrowed his eyes. His expression was as calm as still water, as if he had expected it. He suddenly took out a folding fan and lightly blocked the attack. On the folding fan, a white light suddenly gushed out. Boom! The sword light shattered, but the ninth young master did not retreat even half a step. Seeing this scene, a trace of surprise flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. He glanced at the folding fan in the ninth young master's hand and did not speak. The ninth young master glanced at the sword in Yi Xian's hand and chuckled, Swordsman! Yi Xian smiled faintly, yes. Saying that, he suddenly waved his brush. The tip of the brush slashed out. In the distance, the ninth young master narrowed his eyes and suddenly opened his folding fan. In the next moment, a white light gushed out from the folding fan. Rumble! Under everyone's gaze, the ninth young master was directly blasted tens of thousands of feet away. When he stopped, the star field of millions of miles behind him was directly erased. However, he was fine. The folding fan in the ninth young master's hand cracked, but he was unharmed. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian frowned slightly. He looked at Daoist. Daoist hurriedly said, It has nothing to do with me. It's you, young Master Yi, who couldn't display my full power. I won't take the blame. Yi Xian, Daoist. In the distance, the ninth young master's eyes flickered with excitement, as expected of Daoist. A stroke of his brush is actually this strong. Unfortunately, your realm is too low and your soul is too weak. You can't display its true power. If it was in my hands. Saying this, a trace of greed flashed in his eyes. At this time Yi Xian waved his brush again. A stroke of the brush flashed across the field. In the distance, the ninth young master pointed his fan forward. Rumble! The ninth young master's fan was sent flying as soon as it came into contact with the brush. It flew for tens of thousands of feet. When he stopped, a sword light slashed at him. The ninth young master narrowed his eyes and suddenly opened his fan. A white light suddenly flew out. Rumble! Ninth young master retreated again. And when Yi Xian was about to attack again, the distant ninth young master suddenly opened his palm. In the next instant, a bag suddenly flew into the sky and the bag directly opened and aimed at the distant Zhou Xian. Boom! A gust of horrifying chilly wind suddenly swept out and headed straight for Zhou Xian. Everywhere the powerful chilly wind passed, time and space were forcefully erased, and it was extremely shocking. In the distance, Zhou Xian frowned slightly. He opened his palm and then sword burial suddenly slashed out. An expanse of blood-red light tore through the surroundings. Wherever the sword light passed, it swept through everything. It was unparalleled. Boom! Sword burial brought with it an expanse of blood-red light as it forcefully blocked the terrifying cold wind. At this time, the distant ninth young master suddenly opened his palm, and a huge colorful wheel appeared in his hand. The edge of the wheel was as sharp as a blade. When the ninth young master activated the wheel, the entire wheel suddenly trembled violently, and then it transformed into a white light that tore through the surroundings. With this tearing, a sharp tearing sound suddenly resounded throughout the universe's star fields, causing countless people to tremble in fear. In the distance, Zhou Xian looked at the wheel that was slashing towards him and he frowned slightly. He looked at sword burial. Sword burial had been held up by the cold wind, and he had already used Daoist twice. Using it again would consume a great deal of energy. Without thinking too much about it, Zhou Xian suddenly took a step forward. Because as soon as he took that step, thousands of swords condensed from sword intent suddenly surged out of his body. But in the blink of an eye, the thousands of swords merged into a single sword. Zhou Xian stretched out his hand, grabbed the sword and stabbed it forward. Bang! Zhou Xian's sword stabbed directly onto the wheel, and the wheel and sword trembled violently. In the next moment the wheel started to crack apart bit by bit. On the other hand, not only did Zhou Xian's sword not dissipate, it grew stronger and stronger instead. Meanwhile, Zhou Xian suddenly exerted force with his right hand, and a strand of terrifying force surged out from his arm. Rumble! The wheel directly exploded and then disappeared. Zhou Xian was slightly stunned. He glanced at the sword in his hand and felt slightly surprised. He noticed that his mortal energy and sword intent seemed to have become much stronger. What's going on? Meanwhile, the distant ninth young master suddenly spoke in a low voice. What sword intent is that? Zhou Xian withdrew his thoughts, looked at the ninth young master and smiled. It's the mortal sword intent that I created myself. The ninth young master chuckled lightly. Do you think I would believe that? Zhou Xian was stunned. The ninth young master gazed at Zhou Xian and said, such sword intent possesses formidable energy of faith. Moreover, it contains the grand Tao of the mortal world. How could you possibly have created such sword intent at such a young age? Zhou Xian thought for a moment and said, I relied on my father to comprehend it. The ninth young master grinned. That's right. There's nothing shameful about relying on your family. Zhou Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, the ninth young master suddenly opened his palm and a blue gourd appeared there. He chanted silently, and it didn't take long for the blue gourd to suddenly fly up slowly. In the next moment, a torrent of energy suddenly surged out from within the gourd. It wasn't an ordinary torrent of energy, it was a torrent of time. Moreover, it wasn't a torrent of time from this era, it was from the ancient times. At the instant that this torrent of time appeared, the expressions of all the ancient God realm experts in the surroundings changed violently, and they retreated explosively and distanced themselves from Zhou Xian and the ninth young master. Strands of ancient aura surged towards the surroundings like waves. Zhou Xian closed his eyes slightly when he saw the torrent of energy assault him. Suddenly he opened his eyes and in the next moment his eyes had become an ocean of blood. At the same time, the sword of burial suddenly erupted with a strand of terrifying force. Bang! The gust of cold wind was instantly obliterated. Zhou Xian opened his palm and the sword of burial appeared in his grasp. In the next moment he charged forward and slashed with his sword. The ancient torrent of time was directly slashed into pieces by a single strike of Zhou Xian's sword. At the same time, Zhou Xian suddenly appeared above the ninth young master, and his sword slashed down in a straight line. The ninth young master's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he suddenly opened the folding fan in his hand and waved it up. Bang! A ray of white light shot into the sky from within the folding fan. In an instant both of them retreated explosively, and sword after sword slashed towards the ninth young master while they retreated. The ninth young master's expression was calm as he repeatedly blocked with his folding fan. Even though he was retreating, he'd actually blocked all of Yi Xian's attacks. Yi Xian glanced at the folding fan in the ninth young master's hand, and he was slightly surprised. That fan is quite interesting. Meanwhile, the ninth young master suddenly said, I underestimated you a little. Yi Xian gazed at the ninth young master, and the latter was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. A ray of blood-red light slashed directly towards the ninth young master. The ninth young master's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he suddenly tapped the folding fan in his right hand forward. The fan trembled violently, and then a strand of terrifying force suddenly surged out. In an instant, the region in an area of over 100 kilometers was instantly obliterated. Rumble. The ninth young master retreated 30 kilometers, and his body had split apart when he finally stopped moving. Blood sprayed from his body. The expressions of the ancient god realm experts that the ninth young master had brought along changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and they were about to attack when Fu Yi and the others stopped them. The ninth young master glanced at his own body and then he looked at Yi Xian and he started laughing from extreme rage. Good. Very good. You've succeeded in infuriating me. As he spoke, he suddenly pressed his palms together. Bang. In an instant, an enormous vortex suddenly appeared behind the ninth young master, and then an enormous phantom that was almost 3 kilometers tall silently appeared. At the instant that this phantom appeared, a monstrous aura suddenly swept down. At this moment, the expressions of the ancient god realm experts in the distance instantly changed drastically, and they retreated explosively once more and left this part of the starry sky. The pressure it emanated was sufficient to crush them into pieces. Fu Yi and the others looked at the ninth young master with astonishment. The ninth young master was an ancient god realm expert as well, but the strength he revealed at this moment far exceeded the ancient god realm. Fu Yi and the others gazed at Yi Xian with worry. At this moment they couldn't interfere. In the starry sky, the ninth young master looked down at Yi Xian. His eyes were indifferent as though he was looking at an ant. Yi Xian's expression was calm as he opened his palm, and the sword burial floated silently in his hand. The ninth young master looked down at Yi Xian. I'll bury you with a single punch. As the sound of his voice faded, he punched downwards. Behind him, the huge illusory figure suddenly punched downwards. With this punch, the Qin world and the surrounding universe started to crumble bit by bit. It was too powerful. The numerous universes weren't able to withstand the strength of this punch at all. In the distance, the expressions of Fu Yi and the others changed drastically once more, and they retreated explosively. This time they retreated completely out of the Qin world. At this moment they were extremely shocked in their hearts. Even though they were ancient god realm experts as well, they were really like ants before the phantom's punch. It was truly too terrifying. Everyone retreated explosively and didn't dare to approach this region. Fu Yi and the others were also filled with worry. Would young Master Yi be able to withstand such a terrifying punch? If he couldn't, in the starry sky, Yi Xian looked at the fist sweeping down with a calm expression. The fist was getting closer and closer, and at this moment he felt a terrifying pressure that could destroy heaven and earth. He had to admit that ordinary ancient god realm experts were really like ants before this punch. Yi Xian was also a little shocked. They were both ancient god realm experts, but the gap between them could be so big. Obviously, there were a lot of fake ancient god realm experts. The fist was getting closer and closer. As for Yi Xian, his expression was still as calm as ever. Finally, the fist directly hit Yi Xian's head. But Yi Xian actually didn't dodge or counterattack. Rumble. In an instant, a terrifying force erupted from where Yi Xian stood, and a wave of air swept out for millions of miles. The entire Qin world was instantly erased from the universe. However, nothing happened to Yi Xian at all. In the starry sky, the ninth young master looked at Yi Xian with a face full of disbelief. How is this possible? Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the ninth young master with a slight frown. Did you not eat? Can't you use more strength? I want to die. The ninth young master. Chapter 2349. Needless to say, at this moment ninth young master was completely stunned. He was very clear about the power of his punch, but Yi Xian actually blocked it unscathed. This was absolutely impossible. Ninth young master stared at Yi Xian. What defensive artifact do you have? Yi Xian's expression was calm. I don't have one. Ninth young master said angrily. You do. Yi Xian nodded. I do, and then? Ninth young master was stunned and speechless. Xian looked at ninth young master and asked again, I do and then? Ninth young master stared at Xian. What artifact do you use? Xian smiled. My father gave me a godly armor. Ninth young master squinted his eyes. What does your father do? Xian said honestly, a swordsman. Ninth young master asked again, what's his name? Xian smiled, green shirt sword master. Ninth young master's eyes flashed with doubt. Never heard of him. Xian smiled. Anyway, he's very powerful. Ninth young master looked at Xian. How powerful? Xian thought for a moment, then said, invincible existence. Her. Ninth young master sneered. Invincible existence? Don't you think you're ridiculous? Invincible existence. In this vast universe, who dares to say they are invincible? Who can be truly invincible? Even if my clan dominates millions of worlds, I dare not say I'm invincible in the universe. Xian was a little curious. What clan are you from? Ninth young master looked at Xian. Why are you asking this? Xian smiled, curious. Ninth young master chuckled. I think you don't need to know. If your level is not high enough, even if you know some circles, it's meaningless and will only add to your troubles. Xian sighed softly. Why do you have to feel so superior? I feel that a person, no matter how great his achievements are or who is behind him, should maintain a low-key and humble heart. Look at me. My sister, my father, and my big brother are so awesome. Have I ever been proud? Ninth young master's expression was calm. That's because you don't have the capital to be proud. Xian was silent. He suddenly realized that maybe his father was right to let him go. As a free-range child, he grew up at the bottom of the social ladder. He knew the fickleness of human nature, the sufferings of the human world, and knew that life was not easy. If he was by his father's side, he would have been spoiled and fawned upon since he was young. If he grew up in such an environment, he might end up like this ninth young master. Since ancient times, in the secular world, those emperors who founded dynasties were basically all heroes. But after them, there were definitely many muddle-headed and incompetent descendants. Why? Because the descendants of the later generations had never tasted bitterness, had never experienced hardship. It did not mean that those who had tasted hardship would be better than those who had not. It was just that those who had tasted hardship would be more mature and would cherish the life that they had fought for. This ninth young master looked gentle and cultured on the surface, but his words were filled with a sense of superiority. A sense of superiority that was high and mighty. Just like some rich second generations in the secular world, those who had money would often have a sense of superiority in many situations. Of course, one could not kill them all. Many second generations were also outstanding and hardworking. But in this fickle society, those who thought that they were great just because they had money were still the majority. Ninth young master suddenly smiled and said, I think. Xian shook his head. I wanted to ask about your family. Maybe you would know my family. But I really don't like your tone. Since it's like this, then let's fight. You and I will fight. If we can't win, then we will fight with our family background. Anyway, in this aspect Xian have never lost before. As his voice fell, he suddenly held his sword and soared into the sky. The howl of a sword shook the sky. A vicious expression flashed through the eyes of the ninth young master, and he suddenly bent down and smashed his fist down. The huge phantom behind him smashed its fist down once more. A single punch to destroy the world. Right at this moment, Xian suddenly withdrew his sword and allowed the fist to smash against his head. Rumble. That punch suddenly collapsed and Xian was completely unscathed. The ninth young master's pupils constricted when he witnessed this scene, and he was about to attack again when a ray of sword energy slashed towards him. The ray of sword energy was like blood. The ninth young master's pupils constricted, and he suddenly wrapped his arms around himself. At the same time, the phantom behind him suddenly pressed its hands together and did the same as him, and it completely surrounded him. Meanwhile, Xian's sword arrived. Rumble. A ray of blood-red sword energy suddenly exploded from the phantom's arm, and then the phantom trembled violently before it split apart. Meanwhile, Xian issued a command in his heart, and over 1,000 swords of blood intent suddenly descended from the sky and slashed at the phantom. Bang! In an instant, the phantom was sliced into countless pieces. At the same time, the ninth young master had retreated over 30 kilometers away, and the distance between them had been completely widened. the ninth young master had just stopped when a sword suddenly slashed towards him, and it was swift like a bolt of lightning. A vicious expression flashed through the ninth young master's eyes, and he suddenly opened his palm to reveal a folding fan. He held the folding fan horizontally to block the attack. Rumble. The folding fan had forcefully blocked Yi Xian's sword. Yi Xian didn't attack again. He'd noticed that his sword energy was unable to break through the folding fan. There were cracks on the folding fan and they were caused by Daoist. However, Daoist hadn't been able to destroy it completely. Meanwhile, Daoist's voice suddenly resounded once more. It has nothing to do with me. You're the one who can't bring forth the full strength of this clone of mine. Yi Xian was speechless. In the distance, the ninth young master stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Only now did he realize that he couldn't do anything to Yi Xian. Yi Xian's defense was too monstrous. However, it was also difficult for Yi Xian to kill him. Yi Xian looked at the ninth young master, his right hand gripping the sword in his hand. He was hesitating whether to use Instant of Invincibility or not, but in the end he chose not to. Ever since he broke through to the ancient god realm, he had been longing for a battle to his heart's content. His current realm was unstable, and a battle was the best way to help him stabilize his realm. With this thought in mind, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, revealing the Zhongjian sword in his hand. At this moment he madly urged the mad demon bloodline in his body. Along with the activation of the mad devil bloodline, the burial sword in his hand suddenly started trembling violently. In next to no time, strands of terrifying evil energy and killing intent swept through the surroundings, and it didn't take long for the starry sky in the surroundings to transform into a sea of blood. In the distance, the ninth young master frowned. This bloodline force of yours is a little interesting. At this time, the Zhongjian sword in Yi Xian's hand shook violently, and a sword intent swept out. Mortal World Sword Intent. When this sword intent appeared, Yi Xian was shocked to discover that it was not blood red. Moreover, this sword intent showed signs of suppressing his bloodline force and the Zhongjian sword. What's going on? Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He noticed that his sword intent seemed to be stronger than before. It can grow on its own? At this time, the ninth young master's left hand slowly clenched into a fist, his right hand tightly gripping the fan in his hand. This fan was entirely black in color, made from an unknown material. On the front of the fan was a picture of a ferocious-looking demonic beast, and on the back of the fan was a large golden character. Defense. At this moment, this fan was actually repairing itself. In the distance, Yi Xian collected his thoughts. He looked at the fan in the ninth young master's hand that was slowly repairing itself and frowned. Brother Bai, do you know what this fan is? Daoist did not respond. Yi Xian suddenly missed Xiao. After Xiao Ta, when Xiao Ta was around, he was not so bored and lonely. Now there was no one to talk to. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. A blood-red sword light tore through the battlefield. At the moment when Yi Xian disappeared, the ninth young master's eyes narrowed, and he suddenly opened his fan. On the fan, the ferocious-looking demonic beast suddenly opened its eyes and then roared, "Ant!" Rumble. This roar caused countless star domains to shatter. Yi Xian was the first to bear the brunt of this roar. He was forced to stop on the spot by this roar, and a terrifying force slammed into him like waves. Rumble. In an instant, Yi Xian's body started to shake violently. One after another dreadful energy kept exploding on his body. The remaining power of the powerful energy instantly spread to the star fields tens of millions of miles away. In an instant, countless star fields were destroyed. However, Yi Xian, who bore the brunt of this attack, was still completely unharmed. The armor he was wearing had forcefully withstood all the force. The ninth young master's face turned extremely unsightly when he saw this. He had never expected that Yi Xian would actually be able to withstand the sole attack of the demonic beast within the fan. Moreover, he was completely unharmed. This is fucking ridiculous. The ninth young master couldn't help but curse. How am I supposed to fight this? In the distance, Yi Xian glanced at himself and couldn't help but say in his heart, "Father. It's my biological father." Needless to say, this armor his father left for him was truly amazing. It would be difficult for him to die even if he wanted to. Not to mention being invincible amongst his peers, even experts 2 realms higher than him couldn't do anything to him. To him, this armor was an invincible existence. In the distance, the ninth young master said fiercely, "What the hell are you wearing?" How can you even withstand the soul attack of a heavenly beast? Yi Xian looked at the fan in the ninth young master's hand. Heavenly beast? So weak. It's like I haven't eaten. The ninth young master, the heavenly beast within the fan, suddenly roared angrily. Lowly ant. Following its roar, a terrifying force once again swept out from the fan. Very quickly the force surged towards Yi Xian like a storm. In the distance Yi Xian stood motionless with his eyes closed and his hands spread out, allowing the terrifying force to crash into his body. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In the endless starry sky, a series of explosions resounded continuously. These explosions could be heard in other universes. However, Yi Xian was still completely unharmed. After a while Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the heavenly beast with the folding fan and raised his middle finger. Trash. Ninth young master was speechless. The heavenly beast. P.S. I've been stuck recently. Everyone help me think about the plot. If you have any ideas, feel free to leave a comment. I'll see if you can give me some inspiration. Thank you, everyone. 7017K. Chapter 2350. Trash. This sentence undoubtedly infuriated the heavenly beast. The heavenly beast suddenly raised its head and roared. Soul soundwave attacks surged out like waves. The ninth young master was startled because this power was simply too strong. He couldn't withstand it. In the distance Yi Xian stood still with a calm expression. He allowed the soul soundwave attacks to hit his body. At this moment he was like a mountain. No matter how the wind blew, he was as firm as a boulder. A moment later the heavenly beast was completely dumbfounded, because it realized that the human before it was completely unharmed. Inside the fan the heavenly beast stared at Yi Xian in disbelief. How is this possible? The ninth young master fell silent. He was also extremely shocked. Yi Xian's defense was simply invincible. Yi Xian's expression was calm. Now it's my turn. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared from the spot. A sword ray tore through the battlefield like a bolt of lightning. The ninth young master narrowed his eyes. In the next moment he disappeared from the spot. Very soon the two of them started fighting again. Although the ninth young master could not do anything to Yi Xian, he had the fan. Yi Xian could not do anything to him. Of course he had no intention of killing the ninth young master. He was using him as a practice target. Fight. He needed to fight like crazy. Recently he had been reading and comprehending books every day. He lacked the experience of fighting. Now he needed to fight to his heart's content. The more Yi Xian fought, the crazier he became. The more he fought, the stronger he became. This was because the power of his bloodline had been activated. As long as he did not die, his abilities would continue to improve. Most importantly, his human realm sword will and human realm power were also continuously strengthening. Hence, the ninth young master became more and more alarmed as he fought, because he also discovered that Yi Xian before him was getting stronger and stronger. Moreover, the most frustrating thing was that he could not break through Yi Xian's defense. Even when the fan slashed at Yi Xian, it could not break through Yi Xian's defense. However, Yi Xian's sword could break through his defense, so he didn't dare to face Yi Xian's sword head-on. As time went by, the ninth young master gradually fell into a disadvantageous position. On the other side, Fu Yi, who was secretly watching, heaved a sigh of relief. Yi Xian actually withstood it. It had to be said that they were also very shocked. Yi Xian was actually able to survive in front of such a terrifying power. It was truly terrifying. On the other hand, Qin Gu's expression was extremely ugly. He didn't expect Yi Xian to be such a monster. He knew how terrifying the ninth young master was. But now Yi Xian could actually suppress the ninth young master. What did this mean? This meant that Yi Xian's background was definitely not ordinary. Thinking of this, Qin Gu sighed softly. Back then he should not have been the one to stand out. Now the Qin clan had been destroyed. When he thought of this, Qin Gu's expression gradually became ferocious again. He glanced coldly at the surroundings before retreating silently. In the distance, Yi Xian and the ninth young master were still fighting. The two of them were already in full swing and the battle was extremely intense. About an hour later, following the explosion of sword light, Yi Xian and the ninth young master retreated at the same time. In the process of retreating, Yi Xian suddenly pointed with his fingers. In an instant, over 1,000 intense swords shot out. In the distance, the ninth young master's eyes flashed with a hint of ferocity. He suddenly waved the fan in his right hand, and with this wave the shadow of a beast suddenly charged out. Rumble. The 1,000 swords that Yi Xian had summoned were directly sent flying. At this time the two of them had retreated tens of thousands of feet. After stopping, Yi Xian opened his palm and the Zhongjian appeared in his hand. Around him over 1,000 intent swords floated. Yi Xian's body was like blood, and his entire body was filled with endless killing intent and viciousness. In the distance, after the 9th young master stopped, there were countless sword scars all over his body. His physical body wasn't as strong as Yi Xian's. The 9th young master had fallen into a disadvantageous position in this collision. In the distance, Yi Xian grinned. Again. As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to attack again. However, an enormous teleportation formation suddenly appeared beneath the 9th young master's feet. In the next moment, his figure instantly became ethereal and he gazed coldly at Yi Xian. Just you wait. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. Yi Xian frowned slightly. He's leaving just like that. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Countless strands of mortal sword intent gradually appeared around him. At the same time, the bloodline energy within him gradually calmed down, and it wasn't long before he returned to normal. Yi Xian opened his eyes and his gaze had returned to normal. Yi Xian opened his palm and an intent sword appeared in it. He frowned slightly as he gazed at the intent sword in his hand. He noticed that his mortal sword intent was actually capable of suppressing the bloodline energy and the Zhongjian sword. Moreover, the mortal sword intent was slowly growing stronger. Why was that? Yi Xian was a little puzzled. At this moment, Fu Yi and the rest appeared in front of Yi Xian. Fu Yi solemnly said, "Young Master Yi, they've left." At this moment he was much more respectful. Previously he thought that Yi Xian was a second generation, but he didn't expect this young Master Yi to be so terrifying. Yi Xian looked into the depths of the starry sky. "They will return." Fu Yi nodded, "Yes." Yi Xian said, "Investigate this person's identity." Fu Yi smiled bitterly. "I've already investigated before but I couldn't find anything." Yi Xian frowned. "The Celestial Treasure Pavilion couldn't find anything?" Fu Yi solemnly said, "The Pavilion Master can investigate but we can't, because we don't have the authority to mobilize higher-level intelligence personnel." Yi Xian solemnly said, "Can I?" Fu Yi shook his head. "They only listen to the Pavilion Master's orders." Speaking up to this point he paused, then said, "The next time young Master Yi sees the Pavilion Master, you can ask him for authorization. If you want, the Pavilion Master will definitely agree." Yi Xian nodded, "All right." With that he turned and left. Fu Yi suddenly said, "Young Master Yi, just now that Qin Gu suddenly left, I'm afraid he will act recklessly." At this moment an old man appeared in the field. The old man slightly bowed. "Young Master Yi, that Qin Gu has gone to Guanxian Academy." Hearing this, Yi Xian slightly frowned. "He went to Guanxian Academy?" The old man solemnly said, "He probably wants to take revenge on young Master Yi. I've already sent people to chase after him personally." Yi Xian shook his head. "Don't worry about him." The old man was stunned. Yi Xian lightly said, "There's a girl in Guanxian Academy, she's very fierce." With that he turned and left. He didn't know how terrifying Qingqiu's combat strength was, but he knew that it must be very, very terrifying. Conservatively speaking, the current Qingqiu shouldn't be afraid of an ancient god realm expert. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt a little stifled. How terrifying was this girl in her previous life for her to be so monstrous in this life? In this world, some monstrous people were unreasonable. Yi Xian softly sighed and walked into the distance. Guanxian Academy. Qin Gu directly came to Guanxian Academy. At this moment he had already recovered his physical body. Of course his injuries hadn't healed, and he currently only had less than half of his peak strength. After all, his soul was injured by Yi Xian. However, he still came to Guanxian Academy. Because he had previously investigated that there wasn't a single ancient god realm expert in this academy. Although he was currently injured, he was confident that he could sweep through everything. After arriving at Guanxian Academy, Qin Gu directly roared. "Ants of Guanxian Academy, you have to blame your dean for today's disaster. He destroyed my Qin clan, so I'll destroy his academy." As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to attack. But at this moment, a woman suddenly shot up from below. In the next moment, Qin Gu's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly blasted a punch. Rumble. An explosion resounded as Qinggu was blasted flying. He flew for over 10 kilometers, and when he finally stopped, his body had shattered into pieces. At the same time, a slender hand grabbed his throat. This woman was Qingqiu. Qinggu looked at Qingqiu in horror. You? Qingqiu suddenly exerted force with her right hand. Boom. Qinggu's soul was directly erased. Qingqiu clapped her hands, glanced down, and then said, "Do what you should do." After that she turned around and left. Everyone was speechless. Immortal Treasure Pavilion. Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the starry sky, and his entire body emanated faint sword intent. Needless to say, the battle from before had been really satisfying. He hadn't had such a good fight in a long time. He realized that he really needed to fight now. His biggest flaw now was that his cultivation level wasn't particularly stable, and only after his cultivation level was stable would he dare to slowly try to charge into the ancient god realm. Of course, after suffering a loss from before, he absolutely didn't dare to be too hasty now. Once he broke through and his cultivation level wasn't stable, then the gains really didn't make up for the losses. After the battle with the 9th Young Master, he had a rough understanding of the 9th Young Master's strength. Ancient God Realm. Obviously, the force behind the 9th Young Master definitely had even more formidable experts. In other words, the next time the 9th Young Master came, he might bring even more experts and stronger people. When he thought up to here, Yi Xian couldn't help but frown. Looks like I have to work harder. Otherwise, I'm afraid it won't be long before I get beaten up again. Although he could use Daoist to improve his cultivation level, there was a time limit. Once the time limit was up, he would be weak, and that would be the most dangerous time for him. When he thought up to here, Yi Xian sighed softly. He still needed more time. At this moment he missed Xiao Ta again. If he were to join forces with Xiao Ta, they would definitely be an invincible combination, because cultivating in Xiao Ta's body was like cheating. Yi Xian sighed softly. After a while, Yi Xian continued to cultivate. Somewhere in the starry sky, the 9th Young Master stopped, and his face was extremely ugly. He didn't expect that he wouldn't be able to kill Yi Xian this time. Before coming, he promised the family that he would kill Yi Xian first and then kill Qin Guan. However, he failed. At this time, an old man beside him said in a deep voice, "9th Young Master, I'm afraid this Yi Xian's background isn't simple." The 9th Young Master sneered. So what? The old man wanted to say something but hesitated. The 9th Young Master slowly closed his eyes. Old ancestor once said that our family can't provoke the legendary Yang clan. Other than that, we have nothing to fear. And this Yi Xian's surname is Yi. He has nothing to do with the Yang clan. Why should we be afraid of his extraordinary background? Yi Xian was speechless. 7017K. Chapter 2351. In the starry sky, Yi Xian quietly sat cross-legged, emitting a powerful sword intent. Originally he thought that the sword will would be the same as before, requiring him to break through his state of mind before it could break through. But now he realized that this was not the case at all. The sword will was getting stronger every moment, just like the activation of the Mad Demon bloodline. He had to admit that this shocked him, but there was also a hint of surprise. A sword intent that could grow on its own. Of course, he had also thought about why it was like this. It should be because he had founded the academy. The power of faith. The more students there were in the academy, the more people he had changed, and the stronger his sword intent and power of the world would be. Thinking of this, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He had founded the academy on a whim, but he did not expect that he would accidentally comprehend the sword intent and power of the world. It was really an unintentional willow that brought great results. Of course, this was a good thing. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and continued to stabilize his realm. Immortal Treasure Pavilion. In a room, Fu Yi and Xiao Lan sat opposite each other. Both of them wore solemn expressions. They knew that the 9th Young Master would definitely not give up. He would definitely come again, and when he came again, both of them did not dare to continue thinking. It was not that they were afraid of the 9th Young Master, but they could not contact Qin Guan. Without Qin Guan, they had no backbone. If Qin Guan was here, would the Immortal Treasure Pavilion suffer like this? At this moment, Xiao Lan suddenly said, "We still have to contact the Pavilion Master." Fu Yi smiled bitterly. "I can't contact him. I have tried countless times, but there was no response." Xiao Lan sighed softly. Fu Yi suddenly said, "For now we can only follow young Master Yi. Yi Xian. Xiaolon nodded. That's the only way. Now their hope was Yi Xian. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly appeared in the hall. Seeing Yi Xian, both of them quickly got up and bowed. Yi Xian smiled. You two don't have to be so polite. Xiaolon smiled. Young Master Yi, please take a seat. Yi Xian nodded. He sat down and said, Gentlemen, you should know what kind of enemy we're facing. This enemy is extremely powerful and we can't contact Pavilion Master Qin. What do you think we should do? Xiaolon hurriedly said, We will listen to young Master Yi. Fu Yi quickly echoed, We'll listen to young Master Yi. Yi Xian asked seriously, Will you really listen to me? Xiaolon nodded, Of course. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Since all of you said that you'll listen to me then. Alright, then I'll tell you my idea. Right now I'm the strongest person on our side. You don't object to this, do you? Both of them shook their heads. They had witnessed Yi Xian's strength. Although the current Yi Xian was only an ancient god realm cultivator, ordinary ancient god realm cultivators were no match for him. Yi Xian continued, The next time ninth young master comes he will definitely bring many experts with him. Moreover, he will definitely bring experts above the ancient god realm, right? Both of them nodded again. Yi Xian asked again, Can you contact Pavilion Master Qin? Both of them shook their heads. Yi Xian quickly said, I can improve my strength now, but there's a very big problem. At this point he looked at the two of them and didn't say anything else. Xiaolon frowned slightly. Young Master Yi, what problem? Yi Xian sighed softly as if he had something difficult to say. Xiaolon quickly said, Young Master Yi, if there's anything we can help with, please don't hesitate to tell us. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed, It's not easy to find you. Xiaolon was a little displeased. Young Master Yi, not to mention your relationship with Pavilion Master, we're in the same boat now. Moreover, we still need to rely on you. You're treating us like outsiders. Yi Xian suddenly said, I'm in need of money. Hearing this, Xiaolan's expression froze. At the side, Fu Yi glanced at Yi Xian, then at Xiaolon, not saying a word. In any case, he had no money. And this Xiaolon definitely had money. After all, he was in charge of the Immortal Treasure City's Immortal Treasure Pavilion. All the finances went to him first and then he passed them to Qin Guan. However, he also knew that Xiaolon could not use this money as he pleased. At this time Xiaolon smiled bitterly. Young Master Yi, Yi Xian said with a smile. Trouble? Xiaolon nodded honestly. Young Master Yi, I won't lie to you. Right now I am indeed in charge of a lot of time veins. However, I have no authority to deal with these time veins. Only Pavilion Master has the authority to deal with these time veins. If I deal with them, it will violate the rules set by Pavilion Master. The consequences will be extremely serious. Yi Xian was silent. Fu Yi suddenly said, Young Master Yi is not someone else. Xiaolon glared at Fu Yi. Damn, this idiot's words were easy to say. Fu Yi said seriously, Brother Xiao, I'm not trying to trick you. This matter is urgent so you can be flexible. Of course, young Master Yi definitely can't make things difficult for you. How about this? Let young Master Yi give you a guarantee. In the future he will talk to Pavilion Master about this matter. It has nothing to do with you. What do you think? Xiaolon was silent. Yi Xian smiled and was about to speak when Xiaolon suddenly said, There's no need to do this, young Master Yi. You don't need to give me a guarantee. From now on, I will give you all the time veins in Immortal Treasure City's Immortal Treasure Pavilion. As he spoke he opened his palm and a square box appeared in his hand. At the side, Fu Yi glanced at Xiaolon, and he was slightly shocked and astonished in his heart. Xiaolon is really bold. He knew that the consequences of using the Immortal Treasure Pavilion's finances without permission were extremely serious. Xiaolon was undoubtedly gambling with his future. If Yi Xian didn't have any weight in Qin Guan's heart, then Xiaolon would be completely dead. Because this rule couldn't be broken. Once it was broken, the Pavilion Master outside might follow suit. At that time there would be endless trouble. As the Pavilion Master, it was impossible for Xiaolon to not see this, but he still did it. Obviously Xiaolon was gambling. If he won, then it was equivalent to selling a huge favor to Yi Xian. Moreover, Qin Guan might even promote him. This was a huge gamble, gambling that the relationship between Yi Xian and Qin Guan was indescribably good. Fu Yi sighed in his heart. He had to admit that he admired Xiaolon. This was why Xiaolan's realm was lower than his. But Xiaolon could become the pavilion master while he could only be a hired thug. Vision, breadth of mind and courage. Yi Xian looked at the box in front of him and smiled. Thank you. As he spoke, he took the box and opened it. In the next moment, his pupils shrank and his heartbeat sped up. 2 billion universe veins. This box actually contained 2 billion universe veins. Too terrifying. Yi Xian suppressed the shock in his heart and looked at Xiaolon. Xiaolan's expression was calm and he didn't speak. Yi Xian smiled. Thank you, Pavilion Master Xiao. As he spoke, he removed the Daoist from his waist and handed it to Xiaolon. Take it. Xiaolon hesitated for a moment before taking the Daoist. Boom. Suddenly, Xiaolan's aura skyrocketed. In the blink of an eye, his aura directly reached the ancient god realm. Xiaolon was stunned. Yi Xian smiled. Don't think too much about it. Carefully feel it and it will help you break through. Xiaolon immediately bowed to Yi Xian. He naturally knew what this meant to him. It was a peerless opportunity. It really wasn't that easy to reach the ancient god realm. If there wasn't a fortuitous encounter, many people wouldn't be able to break through in their lifetime. But now he had this fortuitous encounter. Yi Xian smiled. Pavilion Master Xiao, I won't take these 2 billion universe veins for nothing. In the future I will return it to Qingguan. Of course this is between me and her. Don't worry, she won't blame you for this. Even if she really blames you, you can follow me. I will recommend you to the Yang clan. Hearing this, Xiaolon immediately bowed again. Yi Xian smiled. You should focus on cultivating. As he spoke, he withdrew the Daoist and turned to leave. Fu Yi glanced at Xiaolon and smiled bitterly. Brother Xiao, this is a great fortuitous encounter. Xiaolon smiled. I'm indebted to young Master Yi for thinking so highly of me. Fu Yi shook his head with a complicated smile. Most of the time, being a person was more important than being able to do things. Yi Xian returned to his starry sky. He glanced at the spatial ring in his hand and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Now he could cultivate instant invincibility once more. Of course, he didn't dare to cultivate it recklessly. It was a bit ridiculous to spend at least 30 million universe veins to cultivate it once. Besides that, he was preparing to charge into the ancient god realm in 2 months. In fact, his current realm was already unheard of. However, it wasn't stable enough. Thus, he decided to stabilize it for another 2 months. He didn't want to make any more mistakes in terms of realm. In the starry sky, Yi Xian stood silently with the sword burial in his hand. Yi Xian was like an old monk in meditation. At the same time, he madly burned his universe veins. As his universe veins burned, strands of terrifying spiritual energy surged into his body, and the sword burial in his hand trembled slightly. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. In the next moment, the sword burial in his hand stabbed forward. In front of Yi Xian, the current universe's space-time split open. In the next moment, Yi Xian jumped out of this current universe. After jumping out, he didn't attack immediately. Instead, an idea suddenly appeared in his mind. Can I use Void Slash in this space-time? Thinking of this, Yi Xian decided to give it a try. In the next moment, a sword suddenly appeared in the distant starry sky. Wherever the sword landed, space-time shattered. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was stunned. He found that he could use Void Slash. Although its power wasn't as strong as instant invincibility, this sword was very strange. Most importantly, it consumed very few universe veins. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. He found that he was suitable to be an assassin. Thinking of this, Yi Xian frowned slightly. Why couldn't he be an assassin? 2 months passed. Yi Xian's realm had completely stabilized. Just as he was about to charge into the ancient god realm, a terrifying pressure suddenly enveloped the entire Immortal treasure city. In the starry sky, Yi Xian, who was cultivating, slowly raised his head. It's here. P.S. I call myself the water god and you are my readers. Then are you my water army? Hehe. 7017K. Chapter 2352. In the sky above Immortal treasure city, a man stood quietly. This person was the 9th young master. Today, the 9th young master was wearing a loose and luxurious robe. His long hair was draped over his shoulders and a white jade hung on his waist. In his hand he was still holding the folding fan. Behind the 9th young master there was an old man. This old man had white hair, a thin body and his eyes were slightly closed. There was no aura around him. One look and anyone could tell that he was an expert. At this moment Yi Xian appeared in front of the ninth young master. The ninth young master sized up Yi Xian and squinted his eyes. You seem to have become much stronger. Yi Xian smiled. Ninth young master, let's cut the crap. What a waste of time. Let's get straight to the point. How are you going to fight today? At this moment the old man behind the ninth young master suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze landed on Yi Xian. The next moment his gaze landed on the Daoist on Yi Xian's waist. When he saw Daoist he frowned slightly, but very quickly he closed his eyes again. After hearing Yi Xian's words, the ninth young master laughed. Yi Xian, you are not just an ordinary kind of arrogance. Do you know that there was someone who was as arrogant as you in front of me? Do you know how he is now? As he spoke he raised his right hand and smiled. The grass on his grave is already several zhang tall. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, if you want to act cool then continue. I will watch quietly. As he spoke he retreated to the side. Everyone, the ninth young master stared at Yi Xian and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. Since you want to die so quickly, then I will fulfill your wish. Today you and I will fight one-on-one. One-on-one. Yi Xian glanced at the ninth young master and nodded. All right. The ninth young master smiled and was about to speak. But at this moment, the space in front of him suddenly split open. The next moment, a sword broke through the space and slashed towards his face. The ninth young master squinted his eyes and opened his folding fan to block. Boom. The sword light was blocked and the ninth young master retreated several thousand feet. As soon as he stopped, Yi Xian suddenly appeared above him. In the next moment, a sword slashed down from the top of his head. A sharp voice resounded throughout the entire celestial treasure city. In an instant the entire celestial treasure city split apart. Xiaolon and the rest's expressions changed drastically. They hurriedly activated the defensive formation and repaired the space-time. In the air, when the ninth young master saw the sword slashing towards him, a sinister glint flashed in his eyes. With a twist of his wrist, the folding fan in his hand suddenly opened. In the next instant, a malevolent-looking demonic beast directly rushed out. Boom. An explosion resounded like a thunderclap. In the next moment, both Yi Xian and the ninth young master retreated explosively at the same time. As they retreated explosively, the entire sky was crushed into pieces, and it was an extremely astounding scene. After stopping just as Yi Xian was about to attack again, he seemed to have thought of something. He glanced at the city below and frowned. I can't fight here. If we continue fighting like this, the entire celestial treasure city will be destroyed because the city can't withstand the terrifying strength of him and the ninth young master. Thinking up to here, Yi Xian looked at the ninth young master and said, let's go somewhere else. As soon as he finished speaking, he didn't wait for the ninth young master's reply and directly transformed into a sword light that disappeared into the horizon. The ninth young master sneered and directly disappeared on the spot. In a short while Yi Xian and the ninth young master arrived at a deathly silent starfield. This starfield was boundless and there were no living beings. It was the perfect place for battle. Yi Xian turned to look at the ninth young master. The ninth young master was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, Stop. Let's not talk about acting cool anymore. Let's fight properly. I really hate people who act cool the most. As soon as he finished speaking, he directly disappeared on the spot. A sword light directly tore through space-time and slashed towards the ninth young master. The ninth young master sneered, charged forward and smashed down with his fan. Rumble. The sword light was directly smashed away, and at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him. The ninth young master squinted his eyes, and with a thought, a golden light suddenly enveloped his body. Yi Xian's sword fell. Boom. Yi Xian's sword slashed down and the golden light violently trembled. In the next moment the two of them both retreated rapidly. After Yi Xian stopped, he looked at his slightly numb arm. Then he looked at the ninth young master. At this moment the ninth young master's body was covered in a thin layer of golden light, and this golden light had blocked all of his strength. The ninth young master sneered, Yi Xian, do you think you're the only one with a defensive divine artifact? I also have one, huh? Yi Xian glanced at the ninth young master's storage ring, and thought this damn guy has quite a lot of treasures. The ninth young master was about to make a move when Yi Xian suddenly said, Wait. The ninth young master frowned slightly. What are you doing? Yi Xian pointed at the old man a few kilometers to the right and he sneered, what is he doing? The ninth young master said indifferently, he followed me, why? Yi Xian smiled, are we having a fair fight? The ninth young master looked at Yi Xian, yes. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, to be honest, although you and I are opponents, I still admire you. After all, among the younger generation only you, the ninth young master, can suppress me. Today I wanted to have a fair fight with you. Even if I die in your hands, I, Yi Xian, will accept it. But I didn't expect. At this point he changed the topic and sneered, I didn't expect that you didn't want to have a fair fight with me at all. You brought someone here just to let him fight when you can't beat me, right? The ninth young master glanced at the old man in the distance and then he said, he won't fight. Yi Xian laughed, ninth young master, you and I are both kids. Do you even believe what you said? Let me ask you, if your life is in danger, will he help? The ninth young master fell silent. If his life is in danger, then this old man will definitely help. Yi Xian asked again, this is the fair fight you speak of? Ninth young master, do you not have confidence in yourself? Although I, Yi Xian, am not talented, I didn't call anyone to fight you fairly. Look at those experts from the Immortal Treasure Pavilion, not a single one of them came. Why? Because I, Yi Xian, respect you, the ninth young master, as a real man. If I say I will fight you fairly, then I will definitely not play any tricks or play any tricks. But what about you? You said you will have a fair fight with me, but you still brought a super expert to watch over you. With him pressuring you from the side, you are already in an invincible position. Moreover, he glanced at me from time to time, causing me to feel pressured, so I have to divert some of my attention to him. At this point he shook his head and smiled. Ninth young master, is this what you mean by a fair fight? I don't think you should have a fair fight. Just fight him together. In any case you will do the same as you fight, so why don't you fight me together now? The ninth young master glanced at Yi Xian and then said, don't worry, I said I will fight you one-on-one, so I will fight you one-on-one. I won't let anyone interfere. After saying that he looked at the old man in the distance, Lord Apotheon Mu, leave this universe. Also, no matter who wins or loses, you are not allowed to fight. Apotheon Mu glanced at Yi Xian, this kid is trying to provoke me. The ninth young master sneered, how can I not see through his little tricks? It's just that in the face of absolute strength, these tricks have no effect. Lord Apotheon Mu, let me have a fair fight with him. I have no reason to lose to someone from a lower universe, right? Apotheon Mu glanced at Yi Xian, then turned around and disappeared at the end of the starry sky. Now only Yi Xian and the ninth young master were left in the entire starry sky. The ninth young master looked at Yi Xian, is that enough? Yi Xian gave a thumbs up, ninth young master, you're really something. The ninth young master chuckled, I know you're trying to provoke me, but I don't care. What I want to tell you is that if I have to call for help to fight you one-on-one, wouldn't that make me look incompetent? With that said, he smiled slightly, Yi Xian, you can die now. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly leaped up. In the next moment, the shadow of a monster swooped down towards Yi Xian from above. Rumble. In an instant, this part of the galaxy boiled up. Down below, Yi Xian's expression was calm as he slowly closed his eyes. When the demonic beast reached the top of his head, suddenly several beams of sword light directly slashed at the demonic beast. Rumble. The demonic beast let out a shrill cry and immediately fled back into the folding fan. At this moment, the ninth young master was already on top of Yi Xian's head. His hands were spread open and in his hands were two balls of pitch-black flames. The moment these two balls of flames appeared, the entire universe started to burn. Yi Xian frowned slightly. This fire is really terrifying. The ninth young master looked at Yi Xian below and grinned. Yi Xian, do you know what kind of fire this is? This is the Chaos Black Fire, the most evil fire in the world. Can corrode all divine objects. With that said, the corners of his mouth gradually widened. Yi Xian, let me see if your defensive artifact is stronger, or if my Chaos Black Fire is stronger. As his voice fell, he threw both of his hands down. Rumble. In an instant, two clusters of flames swept down from the sky. At this moment, the endless galaxy began to be erased bit by bit. It was extremely terrifying. Below, Yi Xian looked at the two clusters of flames flying towards him with a grave expression. He sensed danger. It was obvious that the ninth young master had specially prepared these two clusters of flames for him. These two clusters of flames were definitely not ordinary divine objects. Should I escape? This thought flashed through Yi Xian's mind, but he immediately rejected the idea. I'm wearing Arya's armor. Who is Arya? She was the little girl who once withstood a blow from Qing'er's sword. Yi Xian's expression suddenly became ferocious. Arya, the eternal god. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly opened his arms and did not dodge. Very quickly, the two clusters of flames swept down and engulfed Yi Xian in an instant. Boom. In an instant, Yi Xian was in the middle of a sea of flames. In the starry sky, the ninth young master stared at Yi Xian in the sea of flames. Very quickly, his pupils shrank and his eyes were filled with disbelief. You? At this moment, Yi Xian was actually devouring the sea of flames. He was devouring the sea of flames. In the sea of flames, Yi Xian laughed maniacally. Arya, the eternal god. 7017K. Chapter 2353. The ninth young master was dumbfounded as he watched Yi Xian devour the chaotic black flames. The chaotic black flames were the most evil thing in the world, and even the fan in his hand couldn't resist its corrosion. But now Yi Xian had resisted it. Moreover, he was devouring it. Devouring the chaotic black flames? The ninth young master was completely dumbfounded. He looked at Yi Xian with disbelief because the scene before him had exceeded his expectations. He hadn't expected that someone in this world could devour the chaotic black flames. It was simply absurd. Meanwhile, Yi Xian was devouring the chaotic black flames madly. No, it should be said that his armor was devouring the chaotic black flames. As for the chaotic black flames, they couldn't resist at all. Most importantly, even though Yi Xian was enveloped by the chaotic black flames, he was completely unharmed. The ninth young master's eyes were filled with disbelief. Impossible. How could this be possible? Suddenly Yi Xian raised his head, and then he opened his palms and two flaming swords appeared in his hands. Flaming swords that were condensed from the chaotic black flames. One was extremely evil while the other was extremely evil. A moment later, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. Thank you, ninth young master. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly shot into the sky. The ninth young master's pupils constricted, and he suddenly waved his fan. A ray of white light surged out from the fan, and the image of a heavenly beast could be seen within the ray of white light. Bang! Suddenly, the ray of white light was instantly blasted apart, and then a shrill cry resounded. The ninth young master was pushed over 30 kilometers back, and the folding fan in his hand had actually started to burn when he stopped moving. The ninth young master was horrified and he hurriedly let go of the fan. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm and the burning fan flew into his grasp. He wiped the chaotic black flames with his right hand, and then the fan gradually started to heal itself. Yi Xian sized up the fan and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Even though the fan was inferior to the chaotic black flames, it was still a divine artifact. Previously he had suffered greatly from this fan. Yi Xian immediately put away the fan. Seeing this scene, the ninth young master's face instantly became incomparably unsightly. Yi Xian looked at the ninth young master and smiled, again. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot. Two rays of light flashed through the battlefield. His speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of the ninth young master, not giving him any chance to escape. A trace of malevolence flashed in the ninth young master's eyes. He abruptly raised both of his hands. In an instant, countless rays of golden light gushed out from his body. In the end, these rays of golden light enveloped him like a golden bell. At this moment Yi Xian's sword arrived. Boom! The golden bell shook violently, and the ninth young master spat out a mouthful of blood essence. Obviously, his defensive artifact was very different from Yi Xian's battle armor. It should be known that Yi Xian's battle armor could block almost all kinds of power. On the other hand, the ninth young master's defensive artifact was clearly only able to block a portion of the power. Right at this moment, the ninth young master's pupils constricted because he noticed that his golden bell was actually gradually vanishing. It couldn't block the chaotic flames. Yi Xian glanced at the chaotic flames and he was slightly shocked. Isn't this flame a little too formidable? As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian sighed in his heart as he gazed at Daoist on his waist. This Daoist is simply lowering his status. It's too lowering. As if he knew what Yi Xian was thinking, Daoist's voice resounded abruptly. It has nothing to do with me. Yi Xian spoke indifferently. I know. It's my problem. I'm unable to bring forth your full strength. Daoist was speechless. Yi Xian spoke again. Brother Bai, it's not that I'm complaining about you. Think about it, I can't break other people's folding fan with you, but I can easily break other people's folding fan with this flame. Tell me, isn't it a little embarrassing for you? Brother Bai, tell me honestly, are you at your limit? Are you unable to keep up with my rhythm? Daoist was silent. Yi Xian sighed again. Brother Bai, you previously told me that you're invincible as long as the ancient characters don't appear. Tell me honestly, are you also acting like I am? Daoist was speechless. Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but at this time, Daoist on his waist suddenly trembled. The next moment, on the tip of Daoist's pen, there was an additional drop of black liquid. Yi Xian was a little surprised. Brother Bai, this is? Daoist said indifferently, ink. Yi Xian frowned slightly. A drop of ink? Daoist said, use it now. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then waved his pen. A black pen suddenly slashed out. Boom. The golden bell that was being corroded by the chaotic black flames suddenly shattered. In the next moment, the ninth young master was blasted hundreds of thousands of meters away by the tip of the brush. And by the time he stopped moving, an area of tens of millions of kilometers had been obliterated. Yi Xian was stunned. The ninth young master was also stunned. At this moment he no longer had a physical body, only an illusory soul. Yi Xian looked at the surrounding darkness, his hands slightly trembling. This Daoist is something. At this time Daoist suddenly said, Young Master Yi, I told you before, among the divine objects in the universe except for the divine books and ancient characters, there really is nothing that can compete with me, including the green profound sword Xiao Ta and the fire on your body. This fire is trash in my eyes. If it was in front of my body, it would immediately kneel to me. So, I am really very powerful, don't always doubt my ability, really, sometimes I am very angry. If it wasn't for your sister, At this point it suddenly stopped. Yi Xian asked, if it wasn't for my sister, what would you do? After a moment of silence, Daoist said, nothing, I just want to explain to you that I am really not weak, that's all. Yi Xian said seriously, Brother Bai, I know you are not weak, but you have to let me feel it. You have to show it. If you don't show it, who will know that you are not weak? After saying that, he picked up Daoist and said, Brother Bai, more ink. He found that after the brush, he found that there was no ink on the tip. Daoist said in a deep voice, there is no ink. Yi Xian slightly frowned. Brother Bai, why are you so stingy? You are not willing to give even a little ink. Daoist smiled bitterly. It's not that I don't want to give, but this ink. At this point it did not continue. Yi Xian frowned and was about to say something. At this time the ninth young master suddenly said, just now that. Daoist? Yi Xian looked at the ninth young master. At this moment, the ninth young master's soul was like a wisp of smoke. This guy is going to be completely erased. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the ninth young master's storage ring flew into his hand. He glanced at it, the corner of his mouth slightly raised, and then he put away the storage ring. He looked at the ninth young master. Why didn't that old man save you? He found that Apotheon Mu did not make a move until now, which was somewhat abnormal. The ninth young master smiled slightly. He knows that I am hopeless. So he gave up on me. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, Ninth young master, among the younger generation of your family, what kind of existence are you? After a moment of silence, the ninth young master said, there are two people who are better than me. Yi Xian asked again, are you personally targeting me or is your family targeting me? The ninth young master chuckled, is there a difference? Yi Xian nodded, there is a difference. The ninth young master said lightly, it is me personally targeting you, but soon it will be my family targeting you. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? The ninth young master stared at Yi Xian. You killed me. And I am also one of the candidates to compete for the position of prince in my family. Behind me I also represent a force. Now that I have died in your hands, they will not let this matter rest, nor will my family. The aristocratic families care about face the most, so they will definitely avenge me. Moreover, the primal chaos black flame and firmament imperial fan were seized by you. These two divine objects belong to my family, so they will definitely take them back. Yi Xian nodded. In other words, they will come again, right? The ninth young master nodded. Yes. Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Do you want to live? The ninth young master was stunned. Yi Xian smiled slightly. I have a soul-nurturing pill here, 200 million Ian vein pills. If you want to live, I can sell it to you. 200 million. The ninth young master was stunned and then he flew into a rage. You are robbing me. Yi Xian shrugged, turned around and left. The ninth young master hurriedly said, I will buy it. I will buy it. Yi Xian turned around to look at the ninth young master. Give me the money now. The ninth young master's expression became a bit ugly. My spatial ring is on you, how can I buy it? Yi Xian smiled. Have your family send it over. I believe that the ninth young master should be able to get 200 million Ian vein pills. Of course, you can also notify your family and have them come kill me. The ninth young master fell silent. Yi Xian smiled. If you hesitate, you will be completely gone. The ninth young master said in a deep voice, I will buy it. Yi Xian nodded, opened his palm, and a pill slowly floated in front of the ninth young master. The ninth young master quickly swallowed it. After swallowing the pill, the ninth young master's soul instantly stabilized, but at this time, a wisp of sword light suddenly locked onto his soul. The ninth young master looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, Immediately get your family to bring the money. The ninth young master glanced at Yi Xian, then opened his palm. A token suddenly soared into the sky and soon the token disappeared into the horizon. Yi Xian glanced at the horizon and then he said with a smile, Ninth young master, 200 million universe veins to buy a life, you've earned it. Young master Jiu looked at Yi Xian. Are you sure you won't kill me? Yi Xian said seriously, Am I such a bad person in your heart? As soon as he finished speaking, he took out an ancient book and said, I'm a scholar. The ninth young master glanced at the ancient book in Yi Xian's hands and frowned. 36 yin yang skills? What kind of sage book is this? Yi Xian hurriedly put it away, feeling a little embarrassed. Oh no, I took the wrong one. P.S. It's almost the 15th. Prepare to drink. Alcohol boosts your courage. Do you know what I'm going to do? 7017K. Chapter 2354. Yi Xian hurriedly put away the sage book, and then he looked at the ninth young master. How long will it take for your family to arrive? The ninth young master glanced at Yi Xian. Right away. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Even though he had Qin Guan's 1.2 billion universe veins, he still had to pay it back. A person had to have a bottom line. Otherwise he would really become a scoundrel. After all, Qin Guan didn't owe him anything. In the distance, the ninth young master looked at Yi Xian in silence. He wasn't sure if Yi Xian would really let him go, but he had no choice at this moment. He could only trust Yi Xian. 200 million universe veins. This was a huge sum to him. After all, he wasn't a prince. However, he could still raise it. In the distance, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground with his eyes closed. Cultivate. His cultivation had stabilized, and once he obtained the 200 million universe veins, he would start charging into the ancient god realm. Right at this moment, the starry sky in the distance suddenly split open, and then an old man walked out. Bang! Along with the appearance of this old man, everything in the surroundings actually became illusory. Yi Xian opened his eyes and looked at the old man. This old man was similar to Apotheon Mu from before, an expert above the ancient god realm. The ninth young master bowed slightly when he saw the old man. Third uncle. The old man glanced at the ninth young master and then he looked at Yi Xian. You want 200 million universe veins? Yi Xian nodded. The old man chuckled. Interesting, truly interesting. Someone actually dared to threaten my clan. How interesting. Yi Xian frowned when he heard this. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly said, Let him go right now. Yi Xian turned to look at the ninth young master, and the ninth young master's expression was slightly unsightly. Third uncle, give him the money first. He knew Yi Xian's temper better than Daoist. This fellow was simply a rash fool. What couldn't a rash fool do? However, the elder did not seem to mind. He looked at Yi Xian and sneered, Kill you? Even if he had 10,000 guts, would he dare? Hearing this, the ninth young master's face darkened. Second uncle, give him the money first, then we'll talk. The old man frowned. Little nine, when did you become so timid? With third uncle here, let's see if he dares to kill you. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Come, try and kill him. Ninth young master was speechless. Yi Xian was silent. The old man mocked. What, you don't dare? Yi Xian looked at the ninth young master and sighed. Farewell, ninth young master. Ninth young master still wanted to speak, but the sword light within his body suddenly exploded. Boom. The ninth young master's soul was completely destroyed and he was completely erased. Ninth young master was speechless. The old man was also dumbfounded. He really killed him? He really killed him? Yi Xian looked at the old man and shrugged. You seem very surprised. The old man was furious. He pointed at Yi Xian and said with a trembling voice, Do you know who he is? Yi Xian said, Ninth young master. The old man said angrily, and? Yi Xian shook his head, I don't know. He didn't tell me either. The old man's face instantly turned pale. I thought you knew. The reason why he was so arrogant just now was because he felt that Yi Xian definitely knew about the ninth young master's background. Therefore he was confident that Yi Xian would not dare to kill the ninth young master. However, he did not expect that Yi Xian did not know. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Where did you come from? I'm a little curious. The old man roared, Brat, how dare you kill someone from my clan? How dare you? Yi Xian frowned slightly. I don't know about your clan. I've never heard of it before. Is it very powerful? If you are powerful, you should have told me. If you don't tell me, how would I know how powerful you are? The old man's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. You don't even know about my clan? You? Yi Xian suddenly looked behind the old man and was shocked. C, what is that? It's flying. The old man frowned slightly and subconsciously turned his head. The moment he turned his head, his expression suddenly changed. He turned his head violently and a sword light slashed towards him. Boom. All of a sudden the old man was sent retreating. In the process, close to 1,000 sword lights came slashing at him one after another. Rumble. In an instant the old man was forced to retreat by these sword lights. He retreated hundreds of thousands of feet. Boom. Right at this moment, an enormous palm suddenly erupted from the sword lights. In an instant, countless rays of sword lights were pushed back while the old man appeared over 30 kilometers away. At this moment the old man's expression was extremely unsightly. There were a few dozen scars all over his body, and every single one of them was so deep that his bones could be seen. Yi Xian said in his heart, what a pity. He'd caught the old man off guard, but he still wasn't able to kill the old man. However, he'd obtained an unexpected gain. Even though the old man was a realm higher than the ninth young master, it seemed like the old man's strength wasn't any stronger than the ninth young master. Obviously, even though the ninth young master was only at the ancient god realm, he relied on those treasures, and his combat strength wasn't inferior to experts above the ancient god realm. When he thought up to this point, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly, and he gazed at the old man. Suddenly the old man roared furiously and leaped up. In the next moment he opened his right hand and clenched it into a fist. After that he smashed his fist towards Yi Xian. Rumble. Suddenly the starry sky trembled as a terrifying fist swept down. The fist emanated raging flames, and it was like a falling meteor that carried monstrous might. Yi Xian's expression was calm. He suddenly opened his palm and then 2 flaming swords shot into the sky. The chaotic flames. Rumble. When the 2 swords slashed against the fist shattered into pieces, and it transformed into flames that shot towards the surroundings. The old man's eyes were filled with astonishment. The chaotic flames. You actually seized the chaotic flames. Yi Xian nodded. The old man's expression was ferocious. Do you know that the chaotic flames are a divine artifact of my sect? How dare you kill members of my sect and seize the divine artifact of my sect? Yi Xian suddenly interrupted the old man. All of you want to kill me. Tell me, what should I do? Should I just stand there and let all of you kill me? That's impossible. Don't you think so? The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. You're done for. You're done for. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly turned around and vanished into the depths of the starry sky. Yi Xian was stunned and then he said, You're not going to fight anymore? The old man didn't reply and he'd vanished completely. When he saw the chaotic flames, he knew that he couldn't do anything to this young man. On the contrary, this young man might even kill him. The might of the chaotic flames was too terrifying. Could even corrode a supreme divine artifact, let alone his physical body? Therefore he chose to leave decisively. This young man wasn't someone he could deal with, so it was better to flee first. In the starry sky, Xian was slightly surprised as he watched the old man flee. He really hadn't expected that the old man would flee just like that. Without thinking too much about it, Xian turned around and left. When Xian returned to the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, Fu Yi and Xiao Lan instantly heaved sighs of relief. They hadn't followed him earlier because Xian had asked them to guard the Celestial Treasure City. During this period of time they'd been extremely anxious. Fortunately, Xian had returned alive. Xian glanced at them and smiled. "It's fine. But they'll probably come again." When he spoke up to here, he felt helpless. It was like beating the young and then the old came. But it was good because it gave him time to grow. He was lacking time now. After a short while, Xian arrived at the expanse of the starry sky where he cultivated, and he sat cross-legged on the ground. He had to attain the ancient god realm. This time he wanted his strength to be able to keep up with the strength of his enemies. Why was he always beaten up in the past? It was because his strength couldn't keep up with the changes in his enemies. He couldn't let such a thing happen again. The days of being beaten up would be gone forever. As if he'd thought of something, Xian opened his palm, and a spatial ring appeared in his hand. It was the spatial ring of the 9th young master. There were an entire 50 million universe veins in this spatial ring. Besides that, there were some divine artifacts. However, the most formidable divine artifacts were the god-ruling fan and the chaotic flames. As for the rest of the divine artifacts, although he didn't need them, he could take them to the Guanxian Academy, which could greatly enhance the overall strength of the Guanxian Academy. He originally had 60 million universe veins, plus Qin Guan's 1.2 billion universe veins and the 50 million universe veins. Now it was 1.301 billion. However, when he cultivated the sword skill previously, he spent a total of 100 million universe veins. 100 million universe veins. Thinking of this, Xian felt a bit of heartache. The sword skill that his father gave him was strong, but it was too expensive. But there was no other way. No matter how expensive it was, he had to cultivate it to the extreme. After all, this was his strongest trump card at the moment. Xian collected his thoughts, then looked at the folding fan in his hand. He had to admit that this folding fan was indeed a bit fierce. Could be used to show off, and when necessary he could give it to a girl. Xian put away the fan, then opened his palm and 2 balls of flames appeared in his hand. After these 2 balls of flames were swallowed by the armor, Xian didn't let the armor destroy them. Instead he subdued them. Now these 2 balls of flames were at his disposal. Needless to say, these flames were very terrifying. If he didn't have the armor, he wouldn't dare to get close to this thing. Ordinary strength couldn't resist the chaotic black flames at all. Great harvest. Xian chuckled, and then he put away the chaotic black souls. After that he activated Daoist, and with the help of Daoist he directly arrived at the ancient god realm. Bang! When his cultivation advanced to the ancient god realm, the aura around Xian suddenly skyrocketed. Xian took a deep breath greedily. He spread his hands and a terrifying aura swept out from his body. In an instant the entire galaxy boiled. Xian opened his eyes and they were filled with excitement. Power. After he reached the ancient god realm, he felt that his strength had increased several times. Needless to say, this kind of growth was very intoxicating. Of course, he wouldn't indulge in it, because he only had this kind of power with the help of Daoist. Without thinking too much, Xian calmed himself down and began to feel this incomparably mysterious ancient god realm. After an unknown period of time, Xian slightly frowned. The power of faith? He realized that the core of this so-called ancient god realm was actually the power of faith. 7017K. Chapter 2355. The Ancient God Realm. It referred to the godly position. After obtaining the godly position, one would obtain the power of faith. The power of faith was divided into many types. There were the power of faith of others and the power of faith of oneself. In other words, one believed in oneself. Most experts took this path and believed in themselves. It was the so-called self-deification. This kind of ancient god realm could be said to be the weakest. In other words, these so-called ancient gods were completely self-directed and self-deified. They could not be called gods at all. Besides possessing numerous divine artifacts, the reason the 9th young master was so strong was because he possessed the energy of faith. Because he was the 9th young master, he had his own fief and world. So there was an endless supply of energy of faith to him. So he was much stronger than ordinary ancient god experts. However, this power of faith was not pure. Moreover, there were not enough people. Many ancient god realm experts did not pay attention to this because pure power of faith was too difficult to obtain. In Qin Guan's words, the so-called gods were all fake, illusory, and not in the right position. Qin Guan had a detailed introduction to the ancient god realm in the Divine Tao Codex. Gods weren't conferred by oneself, they were conferred by the masses of living beings. If the masses believed in you, then you were a true god. A god who was supported by pure power of faith was a true god. Yi Xian's pupils suddenly constricted, because he thought of something. How many people believed in Qin Guan? The celestial treasure pavilion was spread across the universe, and these people's worship of Qin Guan could be described as abnormal. Because Qin Guan had changed their fates. Moreover, Qin Guan had the Wuxia Academy. It was terrifying to think about it. Previously, Qin Guan kept saying that she did not cultivate. Did she mean that if she did not cultivate, others would help her cultivate? The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched when he thought of this because he realized that it was entirely possible. This rich woman was incredible. Yi Xian sighed softly. He realized that the more he interacted with Qin Guan, the scarier she was. It was this woman who made him understand that money was truly omnipotent. He wondered where this woman had gone to now. The sect was about to destroy her celestial treasure pavilion, but she still didn't appear, leaving her to face it alone. He even suspected that this woman was doing it on purpose. Sigh. Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. He withdrew his thoughts and stopped thinking about Qin Guan, and he started to carefully sense the primeval god realm. Gradually, countless human realm sword wills and human realm power appeared around him. Only now did Yi Xian realize that his mortal world sword intent and mortal world energy were actually formed from the power of faith. The reason why his human realm sword intent and human realm power were getting stronger and stronger was because there was an endless stream of people believing in him. He knew that it was definitely because of the academy. Of course, it shouldn't be just because of Guanxian Academy. After all, Qingqiu had gone to the Qingzhou region to develop the lower plane world. The martial arts civilization in the lower plane world was very low, so it was very easy to change it. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. He looked at the extremely powerful human realm sword intent and said softly, "From today onwards, I, Yi Xian, will be a good person. I want this world to be filled with love, affection, and harmony." At this point, he seemed to have thought of something, and he paused for a moment before he continued. "If I turn my father into a good person, will that be a great merit?" The man in green was speechless. Yi Xian chuckled. He felt that he could use his identity as the second generation to benefit the entire universe. He wanted to be the king of this universe. One day, if everyone in the universe believed in him, would he still be unable to defeat his father? Even his head would explode. The smile at the corner of Yi Xian's mouth gradually widened as a great plan slowly formed in his mind. A moment later, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. His aura began to gradually weaken. Not long after, he returned from the ancient god realm to the ancient god realm, but the next moment his aura directly rushed from the ancient god realm to the ancient god realm. This time he did not use Daoist. He directly reached the ancient god realm by relying on his human realm sword intent and human realm power. After reaching the ancient god realm, his expression began to become solemn. He found that this realm was not simple. He remembered that Qing'er once said that every realm could be reached to the limit. If he really reached the limit, Yi Xian took a deep breath. He could not bite off more than he could chew now. His top priority now was to stabilize this realm. A moment later, Yi Xian slowly spread out his hands. Soon, countless human realm sword intent and human realm power gushed out from his body. These human realm sword intent and human realm power hovered around him and continued to grow stronger. Just like this, time passed bit by bit. Immortal Treasure City inside a large hall. Fu Yi and Xiaolan's expressions were still incomparably solemn. Because during this period of time, they had been contacting Qin Guan every day, but until now they had not been able to contact Qin Guan. In the end, they still could not feel at ease without Qin Guan, because they knew that whatever clan would definitely come again. Xiaolan said in a deep voice, "Brother Fu Yi, can you also mobilize a higher level of intelligence?" Fu Yi shook his head. "No." Xiaolan sighed in a low voice. "Without knowing the clan's movements, we are very passive." Fu Yi also sighed slightly. Xiaolon raised his head to look at the distant horizon, his eyes full of worry. In an unknown starry sky, a man stood quietly. He wore a luxurious robe with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He held a jade fan in his hand. Behind him there was a gray-robed old man. This old man was Apotheon Mu, who had previously left. The man looked down at the Immortal Treasure City and chuckled. "Did Daoist? A bit interesting." Apotheon Mu said in a deep voice, "Third young master, don't underestimate the enemy." Third young master's expression was calm. "Of course, my ninth brother was still killed after using the primal chaos black fire. How could I dare to underestimate the enemy?" Apotheon Mu nodded. "That youth's origin is not simple. Not only is his bloodline powerful, but he also has a lot of divine items, especially that Daoist and that divine armor. Especially that divine armor, even the primal chaos black fire can't damage it." Divine armor. Third young master's eyes narrowed slightly. Apotheon Mu nodded slightly. "This divine armor is really terrifying. Moreover, now that the divine ruling fan and the primal chaos black fire are in Yi Xian's hands, to deal with him." At this point he did not continue speaking. Third young master suddenly smiled. "Why should I deal with him?" Apotheon Mu looked at third young master, and third young master said lightly, "Now my ninth brother's people already know that he was killed. Will his old mother let it go? She definitely won't let it go. Therefore we can just sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. In the end we'll be the oriole behind and reap the benefits." Apotheon Mu wanted to say something but hesitated. He glanced at the third young master in front of him and sighed inwardly. In the end he did not say anything. In fact, he wanted to say that in the current situation, they should not continue fighting among themselves. The clan was very strong, but the infighting was also terrifying. Especially the few young masters who were competing for the position of prince. They were almost like enemies. No, they were enemies. Apotheon Mu sighed inwardly. He looked at the Immortal Treasure Pavilion below, his eyes full of worry. He had seen Yi Xian before, and based on his observation, this youth was extremely not simple. It should be said that this youth must have a terrifying force behind him. But whether it was the ninth young master or the third young master, they did not care about it at all. He knew that until now the clan had not really taken Yi Xian and this Immortal Treasure Pavilion seriously. Thinking of this, Apotheon Mu sighed inwardly again. At this moment, the third young master suddenly turned his head to look at the sky, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. "That woman is here." Apotheon Mu turned his head and looked at the end of the starry sky in the distance, and a terrifying pressure swept over. Fu Yi and Xiaolon, who were in the hall below, suddenly raised their heads. In the next moment their expressions became ugly. "It's coming again." A moment later, a beautiful woman suddenly appeared in the sky above the Immortal Treasure City. This beautiful woman wore a palace dress and her hair was coiled up high. Her entire face was as cold as ice. Behind her stood 9 experts, all of whom were above the ancient god realm. One of them was the third uncle of the 9th young master who had escaped before. The beautiful woman suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, get out here." Boom. A terrifying pressure crushed down on the Immortal Treasure City below. In an instant the entire Immortal Treasure City was shocked. At this moment, a sword intent suddenly soared into the sky from the city, and in the blink of an eye, the terrifying pressure was directly shattered. In the next moment, a ray of sword light suddenly descended not too far away from the beautiful woman, and then Yi Xian appeared in front of the beautiful woman and the others. The beautiful woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "You're the one who killed my son?" Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." The beautiful woman's face instantly became ferocious. "Who gave you the gall to do that?" As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly slapped him. Bang. In an instant the space here collapsed at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the distance Yi Xian stood there without moving. Bang. A terrifying force slapped directly onto Yi Xian, and the space where Yi Xian resided was directly obliterated. However, Yi Xian was completely fine. The beautiful woman's eyes narrowed slightly when she witnessed this scene. Yi Xian flicked his sleeve and said, "It was your son who wanted to kill me first." The beautiful woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "Don't you know that he's the sect leader's son?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. "So what? Does being a member of the sect make you superior to others?" The beautiful woman clenched her right hand slowly and she walked slowly towards Yi Xian. I'll kill all your loved ones. I want you to watch them die in front of you, and I want you to experience the pain of losing your son." Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, "I don't have a son." The beautiful woman spoke fiercely, "Then you have a father, right?" Yi Xian hurriedly nodded, "Yes." The beautiful woman roared furiously, "Then you can experience the pain of losing your father." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly vanished on the spot. In the distance, Yi Xian was speechless. The pain of losing his father. Needless to say, he really wanted to experience it. Just thinking about it is exciting. Yi Xian couldn't help but chuckle. 7017K. Chapter 2356. Yi Xian restrained his thoughts because the beautiful woman had charged over to him. Yi Xian's expression was calm as he gazed at her. Suddenly, the sword burial in his hand transformed into a ray of light that slashed forward. Rumble. An expanse of light was blasted apart while the beautiful woman was pushed over 1 kilometer back. However, Yi Xian didn't take a single step back. The beautiful woman had just stopped when Yi Xian suddenly dashed forward. In the next moment, a beam of sword light slashed down from the top of the beautiful woman's head. A sharp sound of something being torn apart resounded through the starry sky. A wisp of viciousness flashed through her eyes. She suddenly opened her palm, and then a strand of terrifying black light swept out from within it. Rumble. A terrifying explosion resounded abruptly. Yi Xian returned to where he stood earlier, and he frowned slightly as he glanced at his slightly trembling arm. He raised his head to look at the beautiful woman in the distance. At this moment, a black dragon was floating around her. A demon beast? Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly. Why does the clan always like to fuse with beasts? In the distance, the beautiful woman glared at Yi Xian. Suddenly, she opened her palm, and in the next moment, the black dragon beside her suddenly roared angrily, and then it directly charged towards Yi Xian. Bang! This charge was like a torrent that carried a monstrous momentum, and it swept through everything. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. He opened his palm and the sword burial floated in it. A moment later, a strand of terrifying sword intent suddenly swept out from within him. At the same time, the energy of the world instantly converged into his right arm. A moment of silence ensued before the sword burial in Yi Xian's palm suddenly flew out. A ray of blood-red light tore through the surroundings and collided with the black dragon. It was a head-on collision. Bang! Suddenly, along with an explosion, a ray of light was blasted apart while the black dragon was blasted 30 kilometers away. However, at this moment, the beautiful woman suddenly rushed in front of Yi Xian. Before Yi Xian could react, she directly grabbed Yi Xian's throat. In an instant, her right hand turned pitch black. Then a terrifying force directly engulfed Yi Xian. Rumble. With the two of them as the center, the space-time around them directly turned into ashes. And yet, however, nothing happened to Yi Xian. Seeing this, the beautiful woman's pupils constricted. How? When she spoke up to this point, she hurriedly let go and was about to retreat. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly slashed his sword forward. The beautiful woman was startled and blocked with her right arm. Rumble. Before everyone's eyes, the beautiful woman retreated explosively for several tens of thousands of meters. When she stopped, her pitch-black right hand split open, and a stream of black blood sprayed out. The expressions of the experts behind the beautiful woman instantly became solemn when they witnessed this scene. Is this young man's strength that terrifying? At this moment, the beautiful woman's expression had become solemn as well. She raised her head and gazed at Yi Xian. Who are you? At this moment, her mind suddenly cleared up. Because this young man is absolutely not an ordinary person. Yi Xian grinned. What's the point of asking all of that now? As he spoke, he glanced at the beautiful woman and the others, and then he smiled. All of you can attack me together. Attack me together. As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings instantly fell silent to the point a falling needle could be heard. Attack me together? The beautiful woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. What gives you the right to act so arrogantly? Yi Xian grinned. It's not challenging to fight you alone. So all of you can attack me together. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and the sword burial appeared in his grasp. Bang! The bloodline within Yi Xian's body was instantly activated. In an instant, the sword burial technique was activated as well, and a terrifying aura swept out from within him. A wisp of ferocity flashed through Yi Xian's eyes. and then he charged forward and slashed down with his sword. The heavens and the earth trembled. A wisp of ferocity flashed through the beautiful woman's eyes. Kill him. As soon as she finished speaking, she and the others behind her vanished on the spot. It really was a group fight. Moreover, there were 9 top-rate experts behind the beautiful woman. 10 against 1. However, there wasn't a trace of fear in Zhou Xian's eyes, and there was only excitement and fervor in his eyes. Fight. It didn't take long for the battle to erupt. Even though Zhou Xian's cultivation wasn't as high as the beautiful woman and the others, and he was outnumbered, his imposing aura wasn't inferior to them at all. Moreover, even though he was being suppressed, the beautiful woman and the others weren't able to do anything to him at all. Because of Ya's armor. Even the joint forces of the 10 of them couldn't break through Ya's armor. It could be said that so long as they couldn't break through Zhou Xian's defenses, then he was already in an invincible position. Meanwhile, the beautiful woman who led the group spoke in a ferocious voice. Exhaust him to death. As far as she was concerned, even though the divine artifacts in Zhou Xian's possession were terrifying, they would definitely be exhausted. Moreover, Zhou Xian would exhaust himself as well. So they could exhaust Zhou Xian to death. At this moment, there was only a single thought in Zhou Xian's mind, and it was to fight. To fight like a madman. He'd just attained the ancient god realm, and what he lacked the most now was battle. Only battle could help him stabilize his cultivation realm. The energy of his bloodline and the mortal world sword intent were growing stronger and stronger. The expressions of the beautiful woman and the others gradually became unsightly, because they noticed that Zhou Xian was actually growing stronger as the battle went on. Meanwhile, an old man by the beautiful woman's side spoke abruptly in a low voice. "Madam, we can't do anything to this kid. We have to retreat." The beautiful woman's expression instantly became unsightly. Retreat? How could she be willing to do that? The old man continued, "Moreover, this kid isn't simple at all. He's absolutely not an ordinary person. We have to investigate him clearly. Otherwise something might happen." The beautiful woman fell silent for a short moment before she said, "Retreat. Retreat." As soon as she finished speaking, all of them immediately retreated explosively. Zhou Xian was slightly stunned when he saw them retreat, and then he said, "Why should we retreat? Fight." As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to attack once more. Meanwhile, the beautiful woman and the others suddenly turned around and vanished into the distance. Zhou Xian frowned slightly. They actually didn't fight to the death. Zhou Xian remained silent for a short moment before he turned around and left. In an unknown part of the starry sky, after the beautiful woman stopped moving, her expression became extremely ferocious. "That damnable ant." An old man by her side hesitated for a moment before he said, "Madam, he isn't simple at all." The beautiful woman's expression was gloomy. "Go investigate him. Find out exactly what his background is." The old man nodded, and then he turned around and left. The beautiful woman's expression was extremely gloomy, and her eyes didn't conceal her killing intent at all. The 9th young master's third uncle glanced at the beautiful woman and felt slightly guilty. Actually, he could have saved the 9th young master earlier, but he hadn't expected that Zhou Xian would really dare to disregard the sect leader. That was embarrassing. That fellow was too audacious. On the other side, the 3rd young master and the others were paying attention to the battle between Zhou Xian and the beautiful woman's group. The 3rd young master frowned when he saw that the beautiful woman and the others couldn't do anything to Zhou Xian. "This fellow." An old man by the 3rd young master's side spoke in a low voice. "That young man is extremely extraordinary." The 3rd young master smiled. "He is slightly extraordinary, but so what? Could he be even more extraordinary than my clan?" The old man glanced at the 3rd young master and sighed softly. Throughout the entire younger generation of the clan, only the 2nd young miss could be considered to be outstanding. Regardless of whether it was her natural talent or wisdom, she was truly top-notch. Unfortunately, such a terrifying genius was a woman. The clan was so large, so it was naturally impossible for it to be handed over to a woman. Actually, there was no harm in handing it over to a woman. However, not long ago, the 2nd young miss was suddenly appointed as the clan protector. Within the clan, her authority was second only to the clan leader. However, this was basically telling the world that the 2nd young miss could not be the clan leader. Because according to the clan's tradition, the clan protector could not be the clan leader. What a pity. Within the clan, countless elders sighed. Because the second young miss was the most suitable candidate to be the next clan leader. Unfortunately, she was a woman. At this moment, the third young master suddenly smiled. My third aunt probably won't give up. After all, she killed her son. As he spoke, he turned to look at the old man. Li Zun, go down and help me investigate Zhou Xian. Remember in detail. The old man nodded and quietly left. In the same place, the third young master lightly waved his folding fan, the corner of his mouth slightly raised. Interesting, in this low-level universe, there is actually such a person. In an unknown world. On top of a mountain, a woman was playing chess with a black-robed old man. The woman wore a long purple dress, her long hair draped over her shoulders, and her facial features were exquisite without a single flaw. Especially her eyes, they were like whirlpools, as if they could suck people in. At this moment, the woman raised a white chess piece and placed it down. Then she looked up at the old man and smiled. Grandpa, you lost. The old man looked at the chessboard in front of him. After a moment, he shook his head and smiled. Amazing. The woman turned to look at the distant sky. In the distant sky, a flock of red-crowned cranes slowly flew by. After a moment, she smiled. Grandpa, you came out of seclusion on purpose. I don't think it's just to play chess with me, right? The old man looked at the woman. Second young miss, you know my purpose. The woman smiled slightly, but I still want Grandpa to tell me personally. The old man looked straight at the woman. Do you have any complaints about stripping you of the clan's inheritance? The woman shook her head. The old man frowned slightly. Really? The woman stood up and slowly walked to the side. She bent down in front of a delicate flower and gently sniffed it, then smiled and said, How fragrant. The old man looked at the woman, not saying a word. The woman gently caressed the tender and beautiful flower and said with a smile, Grandpa, I'm leaving. The old man was slightly taken aback and then he immediately stood up. The woman said with a smile, Yes. I'm very curious about that unknown fairyland, so I want to take a look. As she spoke, she turned to look at the old man and said with a smile, Grandfather and father should also want me to leave, right? The old man was silent. The woman suddenly stood up and walked towards the distance. However, she quickly stopped and said, I just received a piece of news. Ninth brother was killed and the Godguard fan and chaotic black flames were taken. In that universe, the person who could kill ninth brother is definitely not an ordinary person. Apart from internal corruption, there is another reason for the decline of a clan, and that is external disasters. Our clan is now unprecedentedly prosperous and powerful, but everything will fall when it reaches its peak. This is also the most dangerous time for our clan. That's all I have to say. Grandpa, take care. With that, she floated up and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. 7017K. Chapter 2357. Watching the girl disappear at the end of the horizon, the old man's expression was gloomy, his heart incomparably complicated. In fact, this little girl was really outstanding. Whether it was talent or intelligence, she was the best among the younger generation of the clan. However, she couldn't be the sect master. Once she was in power with her strength and intelligence, the clan might become someone else's dowry in the future. They didn't dare to gamble. Thinking of this, the old man sighed softly and turned to leave. Perhaps this girl's departure was a good thing for the clan. Celestial Treasure Pavilion. In the starry sky, Zhou Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. He had a great time in the previous battle. Unfortunately, he found that he was the same as ordinary ancient god realm powerhouses. He still hadn't comprehended the true meaning of the power of faith. To put it simply, he didn't exert the power of the human world sword intent and power of the human world to the extreme. However, he wasn't in a hurry. After all, he had just reached the ancient god realm. As if thinking of something, Zhou Xian suddenly said, Fu Yi. As soon as his voice fell, Fu Yi appeared in front of Zhou Xian. Fu Yi bowed slightly to Zhou Xian and said respectfully, Young Master Yi. Zhou Xian said softly, If they can't do anything to me, they will probably target the people around me. Speaking of this, his eyes narrowed slightly. Guanxian Academy. Fu Yi's pupils suddenly shrank and he immediately said, Men. As soon as his voice fell, 35 ancient god realm powerhouses remained on the scene. Fu Yi said respectfully, We are at young Master Ye's command at any time. Zhou Xian got up. Return to Guanxian Academy. Fu Yi wanted to say something but stopped. Yi Xian glanced at Fu Yi. They won't target Celestial Treasure Pavilion because the one they want to kill is me. Guanxian Academy was founded by me, so they will definitely go to Guanxian Academy. After saying that, he directly flew on his sword and disappeared on the spot. Fu Yi and the others hurriedly followed. In a certain location in the starry sky, the beautiful woman sat cross-legged with an ice-cold expression. In her hand was a scroll, and within the scroll was detailed information about Yi Xian. Meanwhile, the old man by her side spoke in a low voice. He fought the profound god realm once. It was impossible for him to defeat the profound god realm with his strength at that time, but he won in the end. After a detailed investigation, I discovered that the person who helped him was a green-robed man. The beautiful woman put down the scroll and frowned. A blue-robed man? The old man nodded. I've investigated this person but found nothing. The beautiful woman turned to look at the old man. Nothing. The old man nodded slightly and said in a deep voice, there are no records of this person. We only know that he is Yi Xian's father. Apart from that, there is no other information. Father. After a moment of silence, the beautiful woman's expression gradually turned cold. Let's go to Guanxian Academy. The old man was stunned. The beautiful woman stood up. If we can't do anything to him, then we'll move against the people around him. I want to see if the people around him also have defensive artifacts like him. With that, she disappeared into the starry sky. The old man and the others quickly followed. Guanxian Academy. After Yi Xian returned to Guanxian Academy, he immediately summoned Zhou Xian and Xianxia. Yi Xian glanced at them and said, immediately dismiss the academy's students. Let them leave the academy immediately. Zhou Xian was slightly taken aback. Just as he was about to speak, Xianxia suddenly said, Master, let's go. Saying that, she got up and left. Zhou Xian hesitated for a moment, then turned around and left. In a short while, Guanxian Academy's students left one after another. With the help of Fu Yi and the others, it didn't take long for them to leave. Yi Xian came to the sky above Guanxian Academy, looking into the starry sky in silence. At this time, a woman appeared beside him. It was Xianxia. Xianxia looked into the starry sky, not saying a word. Yi Xian turned to look at Xianxia, then shook his head with a smile. Xianxia had reached the ancient god realm. Although he was mentally prepared, he was still shocked. Xianxia, this girl's cultivation speed was already terrifying to an indescribable degree. At this time, Xianxia suddenly said, if I came a few days later, I would have reached the ancient god realm. Yi Xian's expression froze. Xianxia turned to look at Yi Xian. Big brother, you've reached the ancient god realm. Yi Xian said with a smile, Kiddo, can you tell me how you cultivate? I'm really curious. Xianxia asked in return, is it difficult to cultivate? Yi Xian. Xianxia looked up into the starry sky. Isn't cultivation a very simple thing? It's like eating as long as you have hands. Yi Xian's face immediately darkened, feeling suffocated. Xianxia looked at the starry sky and said softly, we should be there soon, right? Yi Xian nodded. He opened his palm and the Daoist slowly floated to Xianxia. You can use it. Xianxia looked at Daoist and said, no need. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Xianxia said calmly, this thing is useless. Daoist. Yi Xian hesitated, then asked, little girl, do you know what this pen is? Xianxia nodded. Daoist. Yi Xian said solemnly, you know it's Daoist, but you still say it's useless? Xianxia nodded. It's useless indeed. Yi Xian hurriedly said, it can help people improve their realm. If you use it now, it can directly help you reach the ancient god realm. Xianxia shook her head slightly. This kind of realm is illusory. With that she paused, then added, brother, you should not use this thing too much. It's illusory and not real. If you really want to improve your realm, you can read Miss Qingguan's books, especially her books about realm. Those books are very good. If you can't thoroughly understand a realm, even if you reach that realm, it's meaningless. Of course, you can use this pen as a reference, but you can't rely on it too much. If you use this pen to reach any realm over time, you will become seriously dependent on it. If you lose this pen in the future, what will you do then? Yi Xian was silent. Xianxia smiled. This pen is a complete layman on the path of realm. Therefore, using it to reach a realm will cause many problems, but its owner is not bad. Yi Xian looked at Xianxia. Its owner? Xianxia nodded. Yi Xian looked at Qingqiu. Girl, did you remember the memory of your previous life? Previous life. Qingqiu blinked. What previous life? Yi Xian glared at Qingqiu. Don't play dumb with me. Qingqiu giggled then said, Brother, do you really want to know? If you want, I can tell you. Because I will never lie to you. Yi Xian nodded. Of course. Qingqiu nodded slightly and was about to speak. At this moment, the starry sky above them suddenly trembled violently. Boom. Soon 10 terrifying auras swept down from the depths of the starry sky, as if they were going to crush the earth. They're coming. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, and the Zongjin in his hand suddenly trembled violently. The next moment, a terrifying sword intent shot up into the sky and met the 10 auras. Rumble. In an instant the entire sky was seething. However, Yi Xian's sword intent couldn't withstand the 10 auras. Yi Xian's face darkened. He wasn't afraid of the 10 auras, but if the 10 auras descended, the entire world would be destroyed. Therefore he couldn't let the 10 auras descend. Right at this moment, Qingqiu suddenly blasted his fist upwards. The moment she punched, the world was suddenly filled with awe-inspiring righteousness. Rumble. The punch shot up into the sky and smashed the 10 auras. Yi Xian was stunned and then he turned to look at Qingqiu feeling shocked. Qingqiu glanced at him and when she saw Yi Xian looking at her she hurriedly said, Brother, don't be shocked, this is normal. Yi Xian. Just then the beautiful woman and the others appeared not far away from Yi Xian and Qingqiu. The beautiful woman's eyes fell on Qingqiu and gradually she frowned. Qingqiu smiled. Why are you looking at me? The beautiful woman said in a low voice. What punch was that? Qingqiu smiled. Awe-inspiring righteousness fist. Awe-inspiring righteousness fist. The beautiful woman frowned. What do you mean? Qingqiu shook her head. Illiteracy is really scary. Hearing this, the beautiful woman's face turned cold. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Qingqiu's words were not very hurtful, but they were extremely insulting. The beautiful woman stared fixedly at Qingqiu. In the next moment she suddenly smashed her fist forward, and a terrifying force swept out from her fist towards Qingqiu. Qingqiu's expression was calm and she directly punched out. Rumble. The terrifying force in front of her was directly smashed, and at the same time the beautiful woman was directly pushed back thousands of meters. At this moment, everyone present was shocked, including Yi Xian. At this moment he was completely dumbfounded. After all, the beautiful woman was an expert above the ancient god realm and she was 2 realms higher than Qingqiu. However, this little girl actually pushed the beautiful woman back with a single punch? Is it really that ridiculous? Yi Xian suddenly felt that this world was slightly unfair. The beautiful woman gazed at Qingqiu with disbelief. How could this be possible? How could this be possible? At this moment her mind was buzzing because she was 2 realms higher than this little girl. However, this little girl had actually pushed her back with a single punch. After all, she hadn't held back at all just now. Qingqiu glanced at the beautiful woman and the others, and then she looked at Yi Xian. Big brother, how many do you want to fight? How many? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, I'm fine with anything. The beautiful woman suddenly spoke fiercely. You're fine with anything? Little swordsman, you don't know the immensity of the heavens and the earth. Do you know that my clan? Qingqiu suddenly interrupted the beautiful woman. Is your clan very powerful? The beautiful woman gazed at Qingqiu and Qingqiu's expression was calm. Who gave you the courage to threaten my brother? As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her right hand. In the next moment, Zongjin flew directly into her hand. In an instant the sky changed color. On Yi Xian's waist, Daoist suddenly trembled violently. It was fear. Daoist was terrified. 7017K. Chapter 2358. The swordsman. Yi Xian stared at Qingqiu who was holding the sword in front of him. His mind went blank as if he had been struck by lightning. Was Qingqiu a swordsman? Moreover, he could clearly feel that Daoist was terrified. Qingqiu who was holding the sword was able to make Daoist feel terrified? Just then Qingqiu suddenly let go of Daoist. She glanced at Yi Xian and hurriedly returned the sword to Yi Xian. Yi Xian gulped and then asked, What are you doing? Qingqiu looked at Yi Xian and said seriously, Brother, I don't know how to use a sword. What the hell? Yi Xian looked at Qingqiu in disbelief. Girl, are you kidding me? Just now Zongjin made a sound. You're telling me that you don't know how to use a sword? Xianxia said seriously, I don't know how to use a sword. Under normal circumstances I don't lie. Xian looked at Xianxia and said nothing. Xianxia hurriedly turned her head away, feeling a little guilty. Actually, I know a little. Xian was speechless. At this time, the beautiful woman in the distance suddenly said in a trembling voice, What kind of monster are you? At this moment she was really shocked. Xian had already shocked her, but she had never thought that there would be someone more terrifying than Xian in this place. When Xianxia held the sword, she actually felt a sense of fear, an inexplicable fear. She had never encountered such fear before. Who's this girl? At this moment, the beautiful woman suddenly felt a little uneasy. Xianxia glanced at the beautiful woman. Brother, I'll fight this woman and you can fight the other 9 people, is that okay? Xian said through Xianqi, We can't fight in this world. Xianxia fell silent. Just as Xian had said, they couldn't fight in this world. If they fought in this world, the entire world would collapse. The entire universe of gods couldn't withstand their power. Xianxia walked to Xian's side and said softly, Then what should we do? Xian glanced at the beautiful woman and the others in the distance and sent a voice transmission, We have to think of a way to deceive them into going somewhere else. Xianxia took half a step back and said, Bro, you're up to it. Xian was speechless. In the distance, an old man by the beautiful woman's side said in a low voice, Madam, we have to retreat. The beautiful woman turned and roared, Retreat? Did my son die in vain? The old man was silent. The beautiful woman turned to look at Xian with a ferocious expression. If we die here today, it's equivalent to him declaring war on the sect leader. Xian hesitated for a moment and said, You want to use your death in exchange for the irreconcilable enmity between us and the sect. The beautiful woman stared fixedly at Xian. Yes. Xian glanced at the 9 people behind the beautiful woman and said, I think that you should be more rational. Take them back now and think of another way. So long as your thinking doesn't go astray, there's always a way. So why fight to the death? The old man by the beautiful woman's side hurriedly said, Madam, I think he makes sense. The beautiful woman turned around and spoke angrily, Are you afraid of death? The old man hesitated for a moment and said, Madam, I'm not afraid of death. I just think that we have a better way and there's no need to fight to the death with them. After all, we still have the sect leader and we can ask the patriarch to mobilize the strength of the clan to deal with them. The beautiful woman stared fixedly at Xian. Once we die, then the irreconcilable enmity between us and the sect will be irreconcilable. As soon as she finished speaking, she spread her palms open, and then a strand of terrifying energy swept out from within her. A moment later, a black dragon appeared by her side again. However, the old man suddenly said, Retreat. As soon as he finished speaking, he led the 8 others along as he turned around and vanished into the depths of the starry sky. The beautiful woman was stunned by this scene, and then her expression instantly became ferocious. All of you actually dared to betray me? The starry sky cracked apart. However, the 9 of them didn't pay any attention to her, and they just vanished into the starry sky. She'd gone mad. They naturally wouldn't go mad with her. Moreover, their 9th young master was dead, so what was the point of them following her now? In their opinion, they needed to find a new young master to protect and not go mad with her. It would be fine if they could defeat her, but the problem was that both Xian and the woman weren't ordinary monstrous geniuses. They would have to fight with their lives on the line. Moreover, the beautiful woman clearly wanted them to give their lives away. So, how could they be willing to do that? Once the 9 of them left, only the beautiful woman remained here. She didn't leave and she just stared fixedly at Xian with a gaze that was sharp like a sword. Xian thought for a moment and said, You intend to use your death in exchange for the irreconcilable enmity between me and the sect? The beautiful woman remained expressionless. Yes. Xian nodded. Then what are you waiting for? A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through her eyes, and then she vanished on the spot. Bang! A strand of terrifying force suddenly swept through the surroundings, and then an enormous black dragon charged directly towards Xian. Xian suddenly said, Qiu, don't allow our strength to destroy this universe. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward and slashed with his sword. Bang! The black dragon was instantly blasted flying. Meanwhile, the beautiful woman had arrived in front of Xian, and she smashed her fist towards Xian's face. However, Yi Xian actually didn't dodge at all and allowed her fist to smash against his face. At practically the exact same moment, Yi Xian's sword slashed horizontally and slashed against the beautiful woman's chest. Bang! Yi Xian didn't move at all, but the beautiful woman was blasted over 30 kilometers away by Yi Xian's attack. Moreover, her body was instantly blasted apart as soon as she stopped moving, and then a sword pierced through the center of her forehead. Bang! The beautiful woman was instantly nailed on the spot. Yi Xian gazed at her. He knew that she was courting death on purpose. The beautiful woman's expression was calm as she waited for Yi Xian to kill her. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Let me guess. The reason you did this was because you felt that the clan wouldn't become mortal enemies with me. Because you noticed that I wasn't as simple as you thought. You were afraid that someone with intelligence would come from the clan and reconcile with me, right?" The beautiful woman didn't speak. Yi Xian continued, "Once the 9th young master died, you lost all your bargaining chips. In other words, you have no value at all. So you used such an extreme method to take revenge for your son." The beautiful woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "The enmity of my son's death is absolutely irreconcilable." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "I won't waste my breath on you about right and wrong. What I want to say is that I didn't intend to kill your son. I wanted you to give me 200 million universe meridians in exchange, but your son's second uncle refused to agree no matter what." As he spoke, he shook his head slightly. "I feel that something isn't right about this. Do you want to go back and investigate?" The beautiful woman frowned slightly. "That old man from just now?" Yi Xian nodded. "I suspect that the person who asked me to retreat is someone sent by another young master. You should go back and investigate. Also, I can tell you clearly that I didn't kill your son at the beginning. As long as he gave me 200 million universe meridians, I would have definitely let him live. However, not only did his second uncle refuse to give it to me, he even provoked me like crazy. I feel that something is wrong." Hearing this, the beautiful woman's expression instantly became ferocious. "Is that true?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "I'm a scholar. I never lie." The beautiful woman looked at Yi Xian for a moment and said, "You won't kill me?" Yi Xian nodded. "I'll be honest with you. I want you to go back and cause trouble for that old man and cause internal strife." The beautiful woman stared at Yi Xian. "Do you think I'll be fooled?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "It's not a question of whether I'll be fooled or not. What I want to say is that your son's death is partly my fault, but that old man is also a problem. You want to harm me? That's not good, right? Also, before your son died, he was very angry not at me but at his second uncle. You can go back and investigate this. Also, he just left without hesitation. Don't you think it's very strange?" The beautiful woman coldly looked at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian smiled slightly. "If you don't believe me, then you can commit suicide now. If you commit suicide now, your goal will still be achieved. The clan won't rest until I'm dead." The beautiful woman was silent for a moment. Then she turned and disappeared into the horizon. Yi Xian looked into the depths of the starry sky and didn't speak. Xianxia walked to Yi Xian's side and said softly, "She will go find trouble with that old man, right?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Yes." Xianxia turned to look at Yi Xian and smiled slightly. "Big brother wants to buy some time for yourself?" Yi Xian nodded. "Very smart." Xianxia giggled. "Big brother, I'm going to cultivate." Yi Xian suddenly said, "Do you need money?" Xianxia blinked. "This." Yi Xian shook his head. He opened his palm and a spatial ring flew to Xianxia. There were 100 million universe veins in the spatial ring. 100 million. Xianxia was stunned. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Spend it first. Tell me if it's not enough." Xianxia put away the spatial ring and nodded. "Okay." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Yi Xian glanced at Xianxia in the distance. For some reason he felt that Xianxia was becoming more and more different. Moreover, he had an indescribable feeling towards Xianxia. Pose. Yi Xian shook his head and restrained his thoughts. He didn't care about this little girl for now. His top priority right now was to stabilize his cultivation and then take the initiative to go to the clan. He couldn't let them come looking for him again, because it would be extremely disadvantageous to him if the battlefield was here. Yi Xian turned around and left. He found a quiet place and was just about to cultivate when a woman walked over from the side. It was Xian Gutian. Yi Xian was slightly stunned when he saw Xian Gutian, and then he smiled and said, Miss Tian. Xian Gutian glanced at the horizon and said, "Has the enemy retreated?" Yi Xian nodded. "They've retreated for now." Xian Gutian walked over to Yi Xian and said, "How can I help you?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he smiled and said, "I can handle it." Xian Gutian remained silent for a moment and then she said, "Are you serious about establishing an academy?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Of course." Xian Gutian nodded slightly. "My ancient immortal clan will cooperate fully with you." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Thank you." Xian Gutian looked at Yi Xian with a slightly cold gaze. "What did you say?" Yi Xian smiled slightly. "Thank the heavens for allowing me to meet such a good person like you." Daoist. Xian Gutian's face instantly blushed when she heard Yi Xian, and she glared at Yi Xian shyly. "You really like to say such nice things to deceive women. Don't say another word. Say another word." Daoist. 7017K. Chapter 2359. Looking at the bashful Xian Gutian, Yi Xian laughed. Seeing that Xian Gutian was about to get angry, Yi Xian quickly stopped and said seriously, "Little Yao, go back and cultivate well. I will take care of the matters of the clan. Don't worry about me." Xian Gutian looked at Yi Xian and said softly, "You are too honest. How can I not worry when dealing with them?" Yi Xian, Xian Gutian continued, "In short, you have to be careful when dealing with people. Don't be sincere to everyone. In this world, the most complicated thing is the human heart. Don't easily trust others, understand?" Yi Xian smiled slightly. "Understood." Xian Gutian looked at Yi Xian. "Promise me don't be so honest in the future." Yi Xian. In the end, Yi Xian promised Xian Gutian, and Xian Gutian left with satisfaction. After Xian Gutian left, Daoist's voice suddenly sounded. "Are you being honest?" Yi Xian said indifferently, "None of your business." Daoist said angrily, "Be more polite with your words, you." Yi Xian frowned slightly. Daoist was silent for a moment and said, "Do as you please." Yi Xian shrugged and turned to leave. Yi Xian returned to his hall and Xianxia had already left. As for where she went, he didn't know. He wasn't worried about Xianxia. Not to mention others, even he didn't have the confidence to defeat this girl. This girl was very mysterious. Even he might not be able to do anything to her. Especially when this girl held the sword, not to mention Daoist, even he who had the invincible sword body felt his heart palpitate. Could this girl have been a swordsman in her previous life? Yi Xian shook his head, collected his thoughts and continued to practice instant of invincibility. This sword skill was still his strongest sword skill and he hadn't used it yet. What was a trump card? Only those that have not been used are trump cards. This move had to be used at a critical moment. The only thing that made him depressed was that this move was too expensive. Although he had quite a lot of money now, every time he spent it, it still made his heart ache. What made him even more speechless was that there was still no news from Qin Guan. If this rich woman was here, he would be able to relax a lot. Although that whatever clan was very fierce, he firmly believed that they would definitely not be able to withstand Qin Guan's disregard for martial ethics and those starry sky divine warships. His scalp went numb at the thought of those messy things. Moreover, this woman was really rich. They were the kind of people who could really kill you with money. But now there was no news of this woman. This made Yi Xian speechless. Yi Xian sighed in his heart, collected his thoughts and continued to cultivate. The news that the beautiful woman and the others had come to cause trouble for Yi Xian quickly spread throughout the universe of gods. Therefore, many forces in the universe of gods also discovered the existence of the clan. All the forces felt a sense of crisis. This was a threat from the forces of the outer universe. All the forces decisively chose to band together and get close to Yi Xian. Currently, in the entire universe of gods, only Yi Xian could compete with that mysterious clan. Of course, there was another reason, and that was that they could not leave Guanshan Academy. Guanshan Academy was developing too quickly. If they wanted to improve quickly, they could only follow Guanshan Academy. Naturally, Yi Xian did not refuse the many forces of the universe of gods. He had already regarded the universe of gods as the temporary headquarters of Guanshan Academy. The reason why it was temporary was because the place he really liked was Guanshan Universe. The universe that he and Qin Guan had named after. Moreover, Xianxia had already sent people there to develop. In the room, Yi Xian was reading an ancient book written by Qin Guan. It was a book that described realms and he had obtained it from Fu Yi. In this ancient book, there was a detailed description of the realms above the ancient god realm. The realm above the ancient god realm was the ancestral god realm. Earlier he'd always thought that the beautiful woman and the others were at the universe enlightened ancestral god realm, but the truth was that they weren't. The beautiful woman and the others were still at the ancient god realm. However, their clans were too powerful, so they obtained a huge amount of faith energy. So, they were much stronger than ordinary ancient gods. Reaching the ancestral god realm was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. It was not something that could be achieved by simply comprehending for a few days. One had to have an endless amount of faith energy. In Qin Guan's words, an ancestral god realm expert needed at least the faith energy of 10 mid-tier universes to condense a true godhead. However, this might not necessarily allow one to become an ancestral god. It depended on one's own fortune. It could be said that there was a qualitative difference between the ancestral god realm and the ancient god realm. It was precisely because of this that countless powers fought with each other for the sake of the faith energy of all the living beings in these universes. Besides that, those large clans cared about the position of patriarch very much as well. Because the person who became the patriarch would be able to obtain the most faith energy. Faith energy. Yi Xian fell silent. He was developing towards this path as well, but his intuition told him that if he obtained faith energy from enslaving living beings, then it wouldn't be true. In Qin Guan's book he was able to sense that Qin Guan felt disdain towards many so-called ancestral gods because the faith energy obtained by many ancestral god realm experts wasn't pure. Besides that, there was another realm between the ancient god realm and ancestral god realm. This realm wasn't recorded in this book by Qin Guan, and it was the half-step ancestral god realm. Qin Guan felt disdain towards this realm. As far as she was concerned, the ancestral god realm was the ancestral god realm, the ancient god realm was the ancient god realm, and the entire half-step ancestral god realm was simply a joke. As for the ancestral god realm, Qin Guan also felt disdain towards it because she'd practically never seen many so-called true gods. Such true gods could be considered as true saints. They weren't hypocritical saints but true saints. Such existences were very few in number in the world. In fact, there was once someone who could be considered as half a true god. That person was Mu Niannian. She'd sincerely sacrificed for the fifth dimension, and the spiritual beings of the fifth dimension respected her from the bottom of their hearts. Besides Mu Niannian there was another one, and that was Little White, the spirit ancestor. The faith those spirits had towards the spirit ancestor was more real than real gold. The spirit ancestor was extremely terrifying. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts. At this moment he suddenly felt slightly vigilant against himself. He absolutely couldn't treat the academy as a tool to enslave living beings. His original intention of establishing the academy wasn't for the so-called faith energy, but to change the universe. If he treated the academy as a tool to enslave living beings one day, then he would be going against his original intention and his own heart. When he thought up to this point, Yi Xian couldn't help but shake his head and smile. Even if it was a good deed, he had to constantly reflect on himself. Otherwise, when the good deed brought him a lot of benefits, he might lose himself and turn a good deed into a bad deed. Helping living beings and enslaving living beings were completely different. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and continued to cultivate. In an unknown universe there was a powerful race, and that was the ancestral clan. The current sect master could be said to be like the sun in the sky because two experts above the ancestral god realm had appeared in the sect master in the last 10,000 years. Moreover, the sect master ruled a high-grade universe, 16 middle-grade universes, and hundreds of low-grade universes. Could be said that the sect master was really like the sun in the sky. Sect Hall. This was the hall where the sect master held meetings. At this moment, many experts of the sect master were gathered in the hall. The person in the lead was the sect master Zhou Xian, who was also at the peak of the ancestral god realm. The elders of the sect were seated on both sides of the hall. The weakest amongst them was at the ancient god realm, and many were even at the half-step ancestral god realm. Meanwhile, Zhou Xian suddenly said, "What do all of you think about Little Ninth's death?" An old man spoke indifferently, "Annihilate his 10 clans and flatten the low-grade universe he resides in." The others nodded successively to display their agreement. Killing the 9th young master was equivalent to looking down on the sect master. Even though there was a competition for the position of heir within the sect master, it was an internal matter of the sect. If outsiders came to bully the sect master, then the entire sect would naturally have to unite. Zhou Xian glanced at them and then he gazed at a man who was resting with his eyes closed. Big brother, what do you think? Everyone gazed at the man when they heard this. He was the current eldest young master of the sect, Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, according to my knowledge, ninth brother brought the God Rule fan and the chaotic black flames with him. However, he was still killed. Besides that, second aunt brought 9 supreme experts with her, but they returned empty-handed as well. When he spoke up to this point, he paused for a moment before he continued, I'm afraid he's not that simple. Many experts in the hall frowned when they heard this. Meanwhile, another man suddenly smiled and said, Big brother, what's wrong? Are you afraid now? The man who spoke was the 7th young master of the sect, Zhou Xian, and he was one of the contenders for the position of heir. Zhou Xian glanced at Zhou Xian and spoke indifferently, I just made a reasonable analysis, that's all. Zhou Xian chuckled lightly, Big brother, do you know that 9th brother is dead? Moreover, he's missing many experts from our sect. This isn't a slap to the face, it's a slap to the face. Can you tolerate that? Zhou Xian frowned and was about to speak when Zhou Xian said, Big brother, if we don't avenge him, then how will the people of the outside world look at our sect? Moreover, he's on good terms with the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, and the Celestial Treasure Pavilion is a power that our sect intends to conquer. At this point he smiled. Just like what Elder said, I suggest that not only should we exterminate their entire clan, but we should also slaughter the universe they are in. This will serve as a warning to the world and let them know that not any Tom, Dick, or Harry can defy my sect master. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone in the hall agreed. Right now the sect was like the sun in the sky. But at this time someone actually dared to kill a member of the sect. Moreover, it was a young master of the sect. This was equivalent to trampling on the dignity of the clan. How could he tolerate this? 7017K. Chapter 2360. Within the hall, Zhou Xian sighed in his heart as he gazed at the indignant crowd below him. He seemed to have thought of something and he swept the hall with his gaze yet didn't see the person he wanted to see. Second little girl. In the past he'd always discussed everything with the second little girl, yet now she'd left. Towards this little girl he more or less felt guilty. Of course he felt even more pity. If this little girl was a man, then she would be the young master of the clan, and no one would be able to compete with her. Unfortunately she was a woman. He naturally didn't dare hand over the clan's millions of years of inheritance to a woman. After all, the slightest mistake might cause the entire clan to be used as a dowry. So even though he owed her a great deal, he still couldn't allow her to inherit the clan. Zhou Xian restrained his thoughts, and then he turned around to look at an elder at the side. Grand Elder, what do you think? Everyone within the hall instantly fell silent when they heard Zhou Xian, and then they gazed at the Grand Elder. The Grand Elder went silent for a short moment before he said, Our clan's plan is to devour the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. Yet now Zhou Xian has appeared out of nowhere. Not only has he colluded with the Immortal Treasure Pavilion, he even killed the young master of our clan. He's looking down upon our clan. I suggest that we kill him first to establish our might, and then devour the Immortal Treasure Pavilion along the way. Zhou Xian fell silent for a short moment before he said, Just as Big Brother said, he's absolutely not an ordinary person since he was able to kill Little Ninth who possessed 2 divine artifacts. Moreover, we know very little about his origins, so we can't underestimate him. The Grand Elder nodded lightly. Little Ninth possesses those divine artifacts, so it can be said that even a few half-step universe enlightened ancestral gods would find it difficult to kill him. However, Zhou Xian was able to kill him. Obviously, he possesses extremely formidable divine artifacts as well. Moreover, his own combat strength is extraordinary. Since such a figure was able to appear in a place like that, then he definitely possesses a formidable power standing behind him. However, we were only able to find out that there was only a green-clothed man standing behind him, and that person had made an appearance earlier. He's the key. A green-clothed man. Zhou Xian frowned slightly. Did you find out his origins? The Great Elder shook his head. I can't find anything. I only know that he is Zhou Xian's father. Zhou Xian stood up. After a moment of silence he said, Kill Zhou Xian first. The Great Elder looked at Zhou Xian. Why don't we find out the identity of this green-robed man first? Zhou Xian shook his head. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, Zhong Yu's ancestor had left behind an ancestral teaching. Do not provoke a family called the Yang clan. If you meet a member of the Yang clan, you must be on good terms with them. At this point he chuckled. This Yi Xian's surname is Yi, so he's obviously not a member of the Yang clan. Since he's not a member of the Yang clan, why should our clan be afraid of him? He killed members of my clan, which means he is looking down on my clan. He should be exterminated. Hearing this, everyone in the hall nodded in agreement. The Grand Elder hesitated for a moment before he said, annihilation is inevitable. However, we should still be more cautious. When he spoke up to this point, he paused for a moment before he continued, why don't we let the second little girl take charge of this matter? We can be at ease if she does it. Hearing this, the princes in the hall all glanced at the Great Elder. They were a little displeased. Because the Grand Elder had always supported the second young miss, so the Grand Elder's intentions for asking the second young miss to take charge of this matter were impure. Zhong Xian glanced at the Grand Elder and then he said, the second young miss has headed to the celestial domain, so don't disturb her. As he spoke, he glanced at the seventh young master. You do it. The Grand Elder sighed in his heart and didn't speak another word. The corners of the seventh young master's mouth curled up slightly, and he immediately bowed deeply. I won't let you down. Zhong Xian gazed at the seventh young master. You can mobilize the Divine Pavilion Guard. The seventh young master's eyes narrowed slightly and he hurriedly said, I won't let you down. He knew that the clan was giving him a chance. In the past, whenever the clan had a major matter, it would be handed over to the second young miss to deal with. Now that the second young miss had left, it was obvious that the clan intended to foster him. The seventh young master was unable to restrain his excitement. He knew that this was a great opportunity for him. The eldest young master glanced at the seventh young master but didn't speak. Meanwhile, Zhong Xian suddenly said, disperse. As soon as he finished speaking, he stood up and left. The corners of the seventh young master's mouth curled up slightly, and he looked at the eldest young master and smiled. Big brother, do you want to go with me? The eldest young master glanced at the seventh young master. Don't underestimate him. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The seventh young master sneered as he watched the eldest young master leave. Yes, yes, yes. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The universe of gods. Yi Xian was lying silently at the entrance to the book hall. The members of the academy had left, so the academy was extremely deserted. Yi Xian was holding an ancient book in his hand, and he was lost in thought as he read it. A refreshing breeze blew past as he read in satisfaction. Yi Xian really liked this feeling of peace. There was no fighting, only silence and only books. After a long time, Yi Xian took a deep breath. He covered his face with the book and went into deep thought. Reading every day could calm one's mind. He also realized that when he was reading, his heart would naturally calm down. It was different from before. In the past he would deliberately calm down, but now his heart was naturally calm. Settle down, cultivate the body, cultivate the heart, and cultivate one's nature. He realized that this was a great help to his sword Dao. At this moment he heard footsteps and soon, a fragrant wind assaulted him. A woman squatted beside Yi Xian. It was Yan Bei. Yan Bei removed the book from Yi Xian's face and she just looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian opened his eyes and the moment he opened them he saw a beautiful face. It had to be said that Yan Bei was really beautiful. Even at such a close distance, Yi Xian couldn't find any flaws on her face. It was exquisite to the point of perfection. Yan Bei blinked. Do I look good? Yi Xian smiled. Yes. Yan Bei suddenly reached out and grabbed Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian instinctively struggled free. Yan Bei glared at Yi Xian. Can't I touch you? Yi Xian was speechless. Yan Bei pushed her luck. She suddenly caressed Yi Xian's cheek with her right hand and said softly, I've become the Yan clan's leader. Yi Xian was slightly startled and then he said, Congratulations. Yan Bei looked at Yi Xian. Do you want me to go back? Yi Xian smiled. Do you want to go back yourself? Yan Bei glared at Yi Xian. I'll ask you first. Don't give me anything else. Just answer my question. Yi Xian looked at Yan Bei. Suddenly he reached out and gently placed his hand on Yan Bei's face. Yan Bei was slightly startled and then she blushed. Yi Xian smiled. If I say I hurt you, you'll definitely be very sad, right? Yan Bei lowered her head slightly and was silent. Yi Xian continued. If I say something nice, you'll definitely be very happy. Yanbei looked up at Yi Xian. Then tell me the truth. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. I'm afraid. Yanbei was stunned. Then she asked, what are you afraid of? Yi Xian said softly, along the way I've met a few women but now they're all very far away from me. I'm afraid that one day you'll be like them, gradually becoming a passerby and then forgotten by the world. As he said that he looked at Daoist at his waist. I used to suspect that Daoist was messing around, but later I realized that this guy doesn't seem to be that powerful. Daoist, Yi Xian looked at Yanbei and said softly, I'm really very afraid. Yanbei was silent for a moment. I can't keep up with your footsteps so I'll be forgotten, right? Yi Xian was about to speak when Daoist suddenly said, Young Master Yi, this has nothing to do with me. The reason for this is that you've never been serious and responsible. Just tell me, how many women have you flirted with along the way? Of course, in your eyes you're just making friends normally, but have you ever thought that some of your actions will make them fall in love with you? Yi Xian frowned slightly. What actions? Daoist said, pretentious actions. Yi Xian, Daoist said again, if it's just pretentious then it's superficial. The problem is you're not just pretentious, you're really awesome. Also you're very generous. I've always thought that if you came to the Milky Way, it would definitely be a disaster for the women in the Milky Way. After saying that it paused and said, Young Master Yi, are you interested in coming to the Milky Way? Yi Xian was a little curious. Why? Daoist said, no why, I'm just asking. If you want to come to the Milky Way I can open the door for you and let you come over. Yi Xian suddenly felt that something was wrong. Bye bro, why do you want me to go to the Milky Way? You're not right. Daoist was silent. Seeing Daoist's silence, Yi Xian felt that something was wrong and immediately said, stop hemming and hawing. Can't you just say what you want? Daoist sighed softly. Young Master Yi, you should come to the Milky Way and persuade your sister. Your sister is in the Milky Way, it's too dangerous. Hearing that, Yi Xian frowned. What's wrong with Qing? Don't scare me. Daoist said, Big brother, what can she do? Tell me, what can she do? It's the Milky Way that's dangerous. Her emotions are not particularly stable now. She stands by the seaside every day and no one knows what she's thinking. In order to prevent others from provoking her, I'm about to collapse. Now within 100 miles of her, as long as there's a bad person, I'll immediately kill them. The purpose is to prevent others from provoking her, and then give her a reason and an excuse to destroy the Milky Way. The problem is this is not a solution. Because I can feel that her emotions are becoming more and more unstable. If this goes on, I feel like I'm going to collapse. Unstable emotions. Yi Xian frowned. Why is Qing'er's emotions unstable? Did you bully her? Damn. Daoist said angrily, Father, I call you father. I know you have a deep sibling relationship, but can you think before you speak? Bully her? Tell me who could bully her. Who dared to bully her? Dear father, can you take her away? If you take her away, I'll do anything. Yi Xian was speechless. 7017K. Chapter 2361. Yi Xian ignored Daoist. At this moment there was only one thought in his mind. Qing'er's emotions are unstable. Why is Qing'er's emotions unstable? Yi Xian got up, his brows furrowed. Yanbei whispered, What's wrong? Yi Xian looked at Yanbei. Do you want to go back and be the clan leader? If you do, then go back. If not, then stay in the academy. Yanbei was silent. Yi Xian smiled. No matter what choice you make, it will not affect our relationship. Yanbei looked up at Yi Xian. What relationship? Yi Xian shrugged. An ambiguous relationship. Yanbei glared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, you are so thick-skinned. After saying that, she turned around and disappeared into the horizon. Yi Xian did not see the smile on her face the moment she turned around. Yi Xian looked at the horizon and whispered, I am such a scumbag. Saying that, he shook his head and said, Brother Bai, I want to see Qing. Daoist said, Do you want to meet through space? Yi Xian shook his head, Send me to the Milky Way. Daoist immediately said, Arrange it. As soon as he said that, Daoist on Yi Xian's waist suddenly trembled. The next moment the space around Yi Xian directly became illusory. Yi Xian suddenly said, Brother Bai, if I leave now, what if those clans come looking for trouble with my academy? Daoist immediately said, I will guard your academy for you. During this period, if anyone dares to come looking for trouble, I will arrange it clearly. Yi Xian, Daoist continued, you are too far away from the Milky Way. Even with my strength I can't teleport you there. Therefore you need to travel through time. Also, you have to come back within 2 hours because the time in the Milky Way is different from the time on your side. If you come back too late it will affect many things on your side. As soon as he finished speaking, the Daoist on Yi Xian's waist suddenly trembled violently. Soon Yi Xian completely disappeared. In an unknown and mysterious spacetime, Yi Xian frowned. At this moment he was traveling through spacetime at a terrifying speed. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Brother Bai, ordinary people can't go to the Milky Way, right? Daoist said, yes. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Daoist said, this place is a pure land. Master doesn't let anyone disturb this place. Yi Xian was curious. Your master. Daoist said, is it strange? Yi Xian smiled. It is a little shocking. By the way, is your master powerful? Daoist was silent for a moment and said, this question. Yi Xian asked again, is he as powerful as Qing'er? Daoist. Yi Xian wanted to ask something else, but Daoist suddenly said, we are here. Boom. As soon as Daoist's voice fell, Yi Xian appeared directly on a beach. Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes and looked around. At this moment he was standing on a beach. In front of him was the endless sea. Not far away there was a woman in a plain dress standing on the beach. Seeing Qing'er, a smile appeared on Yi Xian's face. At this time Qing'er slowly turned around. When she saw Yi Xian, her cold face suddenly melted and a smile appeared on it. Brother. Her voice was as soft as water. Yi Xian slowly walked to Qing'er and stretched out his right hand. Qing'er placed her right hand in Yi Xian's. Yi Xian held Qing'er's lily-white hand tightly and said softly, Qing'er. Qing'er suddenly fell into Yi Xian's arms. She leaned her head on Yi Xian's shoulder and closed her eyes. Her arms wrapped around Yi Xian's waist and she didn't say anything. She was only Yi Xian's Qing'er. After a long time the brother and sister sat on a large rock. Qing'er leaned her head on Yi Xian's shoulder. The two looked at the horizon. There a red sun was slowly rising. It was a beautiful sight. Qing'er suddenly said softly, beautiful. Yi Xian turned to look at Qing'er who was close at hand. He said softly, you've been unhappy lately, haven't you? Qing'er nodded. Yi Xian asked, why not? Qing'er gently rubbed her head on Yi Xian's shoulder. She said softly, I'm invincible. Yi Xian, Daoist. Qing'er looked up at Yi Xian. Brother, do you know how strong I am? Yi Xian shook his head. Qing'er suddenly pointed at the sea in front of her. Brother, look at the sea. It's hard to say how big the universe is, but I can give you a rough idea. A drop of water is equivalent to a universe. Yi Xian's pupils shrank. The sea is boundless. In other words, this universe. Qing'er nodded. This is still the current universe. Outside of the current universe, there is another universe. I call it the boundless universe. That boundless universe is truly boundless. It has no boundaries and there is no end to it. Yi Xian frowned. Even you can't find the end? Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. I can. She opened her palm. The walking sword appeared in her hand. No matter how wide the universe is, it's not wider than my sword. No matter how long the universe is, it's not longer than my sword. To me, whether it's the current universe or the boundless universe, it's just a speck of dust under my feet. Yi Xian was speechless. Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. If I want to, I can destroy the current universe or the boundless universe with one sword. One sword to destroy. Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. Amazing. Qing'er blinked. That's normal. Yi Xian's expression froze. This Qing'er is getting a little naughty. Qing'er asked again, Brother, you haven't left the current universe, right? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Qing'er said softly. Then you still have a long way to go. As she spoke she smiled. That's a good thing. In this way I can accompany you for a long time. Yi Xian suddenly grabbed Qing'er's hand. Qing'er, if I become invincible one day will you leave me? Qing'er was silent. Yi Xian panicked. He grabbed Qing'er's shoulder. Answer me. Qing'er smiled. I won't leave you if you don't want to. Yi Xian smiled. You never lied to me, right? Qing nodded. Yi Xian smiled. How can I bear to let you go? Qing held Yi Xian's hand tightly with her left hand. Leaning her head on Yi Xian's shoulder, she said in a low voice, Brother, thank you. Yi Xian was curious. What are you thanking me for? Qing looked at the warm sun in the distance and said softly, Thank you for making me feel that my life is meaningful. Without you, my life would be meaningless. Only when you are here can I feel that my life is real. As she spoke, she gently rubbed her head against Yi Xian's shoulder and softly said, I've seen this sunrise countless times, but I've never thought it was good. But now I feel that this sunrise is extremely beautiful. After saying that, she slowly closed her eyes, and the corners of her mouth unconsciously rose into a charming smile. It's so good to have you. Then let this universe live for a while longer. Daoist. P.S. Today is Chinese Valentine's Day. Happy Chinese Valentine's Day. 7017K. Chapter 2362. On the beach, the siblings sat quietly. The sea breeze blew and the woman's dress fluttered gently. She leaned on Yi Xian's shoulder and the distant sea and sky merged into one. Picturesque. On the other side, a little girl was looking at Yi Xian and his sister. She was wearing fashionable short-sleeved jeans, and her hair was tied up in a ponytail. She held a stick of tonghulu in her hand. Sitting on her shoulder was a white furry little guy. It was Arya and Little White. Arya looked at Yi Xian and his sister in the distance. Isn't that little Xuanzi? Why is he here? Little White blinked and waved its claws, but no one knew what it was trying to say. Arya glanced at Tianming, then said, For little Xuanzi's sake I won't hit her today. Let's go. With that she turned and ran. Little White was speechless. On the boulder, Yi Xian said softly, Qing, it's so safe to follow you. Daoist was speechless. Qing smiled. I'll take you somewhere. With that she got up and pulled Yi Xian into the distance. Yi Xian was curious. Where are we going? Qing's lips curled. It's a secret for now. Yi Xian chuckled. Qing, you have to smile more in the future. I like it when you're happy. Qing nodded. I only smile in front of you. Yi Xian shook his head. Having you is the happiest thing in my life. Qing smiled and held Yi Xian's hand tightly. I've lost you once. But now I won't lose you again. As long as you're alive, the universe will be safe. If you die, the universe will be buried with you. As she spoke, she turned her head and coldly glanced at someone. No one knew who she was looking at. On Yi Xian's waist, Daoist trembled slightly. Yi Xian felt warm in his heart. He had to admit that the feeling of being pampered was really good. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian hurriedly said, Qing, I founded an academy. As he spoke, he told them about Guanxian Academy and his goal. Qing looked at Yi Xian. Change the universe? Yi Xian nodded. Do you think it's feasible? After a moment of silence, Qing said, The sword Dao of the human world is certainly feasible. To use the faith of all living beings as a sword, this sword Dao is extraordinary. Not bad. Yi Xian was overjoyed and quickly asked, If I cultivate to the extreme, how would it compare to Qing? Qing blinked. This, Yi Xian said seriously, Qing, tell me the truth. After a moment of silence, Qing said, If I cultivate to the extreme, it should be possible. Possible? Yi Xian's expression froze. Qing glanced at Yi Xian's expression and quickly said, To use the faith of all living beings as a sword, this sword Dao must be extraordinary. If you cultivate to the extreme, you will definitely not be weaker than me. Yi Xian looked at Qing, not saying a word. Qing hesitated and then said, I'm speaking the truth, not a single lie. With that she pointed to Daoist on Yi Xian's waist. If you don't believe me, you can ask it. Daoist hurriedly said with a trembling voice, Yes, young Master Yi, what your sister said is absolutely true. I guarantee with my life you should believe her. It was on the verge of tears. Yi Xian rolled his eyes at Qing. Just pamper me. Qing tidied up Yi Xian's messy collar and then said softly, In this life I will only pamper you. Yi Xian held Qing's hand tightly, and the siblings walked into the distance. On the other side, a woman was watching Yi Xian and his sister. She was the deputy sect leader of the Milky Way sect, the most powerful force in the Milky Way galaxy, Yang Lianshuang. Beside Yang Lianshuang were 9 people, all of whom were powerful people in the Milky Way galaxy. Yang Lianshuang looked at Yi Xian and his sister in the distance. Do you know why I brought the 9 of you here? The 9 of them shook their heads. Yang Lianshuang looked at Yi Xian and said softly, Do you see that young man? The 9 of them nodded. Yang Lianshuang said, Remember his appearance. Remember it well. With that she turned and left. The 9 of them were confused. At that moment Yang Lianshuang said again, He is the Milky Way sect's young sect master, and the future master of the Milky Way sect. Hearing that, the 9 of them were shocked. Ever since the Milky Way sect was founded, it had dominated the entire Milky Way galaxy at a terrifying speed, and the entire Milky Way galaxy had gradually entered the immortal cultivation era because of the Milky Way sect. However, the people of the Milky Way sect had never seen the sect master. Everyone was very curious about this sect master, and now Yang Lianshuang actually said that the young man was the future sect master of the Milky Way sect. In the distance Yang Lianshuang said again, Don't disturb them. The 9 of them bowed deeply to Yi Xian and then left quietly. Qing'er brought Yi Xian to the foot of a mountain. Yi Xian looked up and the mountain peak was shrouded in clouds and it was unpredictable. Yi Xian was a little curious. Qing'er, can you tell me now? Qing'er shook her head. No. Yi Xian smiled. All right. The siblings walked up the mountain. On the way Yi Xian suddenly asked, Qing'er, why are we walking and not flying? Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. Every moment with you is precious. Yi Xian panicked. Qing'er, you make it sound like we are parting forever. Qing'er smiled. Don't worry. No one in this world can kill me. As for parting, we will have to part for a while after this. Yi Xian hurriedly asked. Why? The green girl raised her head and took a look. Because I've found something interesting and I want to verify it. Yi Xian was a little curious. What is it? Qing'er was silent. Yi Xian blinked. Is it a little hard to explain? Qing'er nodded. Yi Xian said with a smile, Then don't explain. Wait until I'm strong enough. When I am strong enough I will know, right? Qing'er lowered her head. Brother, don't be so pressured. If one day you feel life is hard, don't struggle. Invincibility isn't difficult. If you are willing, I can give you a sword energy and you will be invincible in the world. Yi Xian rolled his eyes. Qing'er, you will ruin my Dao heart. A wisp of a brilliant smile appeared on Qing'er's face. Alright, then go work hard. Yi Xian nodded. He believed Qing'er. If Qing'er gave him a sword energy he would be invincible. But that wasn't his goal. His real goal was to reach Qing'er's level. If he relied on Qing'er's invincibility he would never be able to reach Qing'er's level. At this time, a voice suddenly came from the side. Look at those two. That man is so handsome, and that woman. My God. There are such beautiful people in this world. Hearing the voice, Yi Xian turned his head. Not far away 2 women were looking at him and Qing'er. The clothes of these 2 women were completely different from the clothes of his universe. The woman on the left was wearing a tight-fitting short-sleeved shirt that tightly wrapped around her chest. Because it was too tight, it made the woman's chest look incomparably large, as big as a watermelon. The woman's short-sleeved shirt was very short, reaching her abdomen. Thus her belly button was completely exposed. Her lower abdomen was very flat and her waist was slender. Just her upper body alone was enough to make countless men fall for her. Below her lower abdomen, the scenery was even more beautiful. But because of the problem of harmony, Yi Xian's eyes could only glance over her legs. Her legs were slender and she wore very tight trousers. This made her legs even more alluring. The woman's appearance was also very beautiful. Her long hair fluttered in the wind. She was sexy and had a trace of fairy-like aura. Beside the woman was a woman wearing sports trousers. Although this woman wasn't devastatingly beautiful, she wasn't bad either. She carried a small bag and was curiously staring at Yi Xian and Qing'er. She was the one who said the words just now. Seeing Yi Xian look over, the woman with the bag hurriedly said excitedly, Sister Muyu, he's looking at us. Look at his clothes. He should be acting. He definitely knows you. I bet he will definitely ask you for your autograph. The woman called Muyu glanced at Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly withdrew his gaze, and then he pulled Qing'er along as they continued up the mountain. Muyu was slightly stunned when she saw Yi Xian and Qing'er leave. Meanwhile, the woman by her side spoke with surprise. He doesn't know Big Sister Muyu? That shouldn't be the case. Meanwhile, Muyu suddenly walked swiftly towards the distance, and it didn't take long for her to arrive before Yi Xian and Qing'er. She sized up Yi Xian and Qing'er before she looked at Yi Xian and said, "Are the two of you antiquarian lovers?" Yi Xian was slightly surprised. "Antiquarian lovers?" Mu Yu said, "You're dressed very antiquarian." Yi Xian was stunned for a moment and then he smiled and said, "Sort of." Mu Yu gazed at Yi Xian and said, "Are you interested in acting? You'll definitely become famous if you're willing." Yi Xian blinked and said, "Miss, I'm not interested in acting." Then he pulled Qing'er and was about to leave. Mu Yu suddenly said, "You don't know me?" Yi Xian looked at Mu Yu and said, "No." Mu Yu stared at Yi Xian and said nothing. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, "Miss, I'm from another world." Mu Yu's expression was calm. "Are you from Mars?" "Mars." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Miss, this is my first time in the Milky Way. I'm not familiar with this place, so there might be many differences in our conversation, so—" "Ridiculous." Mu Yu frowned and was a little displeased. "If you're not willing, just say it. Why do you have to lie to me? Do you think I—" At this time Qing'er suddenly flicked her sleeves and a sword ray flew out. Boom. Thousands of feet away, a huge mountain suddenly turned into dust. Mu Yu was stunned on the spot and she looked at Qing'er with a face full of terror. Are you a legendary sword immortal? No, you should be a great sword immortal, right?" "Great sword immortal." Qing'er was slightly stunned, and then she turned to look at Yi Xian, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. "Brother, I'm a great sword immortal." Yi Xian said seriously, "Amazing." The brother and sister looked at each other and smiled. At this moment they seemed to have returned to the beginning. At the side, Mu Yu looked at Yi Xian and said with a trembling voice, Are you also a cultivator?" Yi Xian nodded and then he opened his palm and a sword suddenly flew out and shot into the sky. Mu Yu looked at the sword at the end of the horizon and said with a trembling voice, You look even stronger than your sister." Yi Xian said seriously, "Of course I'm invincible under the three swords and I'm also invincible above the three swords." After saying that he looked at Qing'er. "Is that right?" Qing'er blinked and then gave him a thumbs up and smiled sweetly. "Brother, you're always a god." Chapter 2363. Haha. Yi Xian laughed, then pulled Qing'er towards the top of the mountain. Mu Yu and Qing'er were still petrified. After a long time Mu Yu came back to her senses and said with a trembling voice, "They really are sword immortals. They really are sword immortals." Although the Milky Way had entered the immortal cultivation era, there were still too few swordsmen. Moreover, they had only seen a sword slash through a mountain in television dramas. There really are sword immortals in the world. Mu Yu was stunned for a long time then said, "Let's go to the top of Qingwan Peak." Saying so she ran madly towards the top of the mountain. Yi Xian pulled Qing'er to the top of the mountain. The moment he set foot on the top, Yi Xian was a little surprised. The view at the top of the mountain was vast and boundless. Looking up he could see a blue sky and white clouds. Looking ahead he saw a towering ancient tree not far away. Beside the ancient tree was a waterfall, water splashing into a pool. Below his feet was a xiaodao made of bluestone. At the end of the xiaodao was the ancient tree. Above the ancient tree there was a wooden hut. In front of the wooden hut there was a small dog and at this moment the dog was shivering. Yi Xian turned to look at Qing'er. "This is..." Qing'er looked at the wooden hut in the distance. "Do you know who is inside?" Yi Xian shook his head. Qing'er looked calm. "The owner of the pen." Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. He turned to look at the wooden hut. "This wooden hut is actually the owner of Daoist, a super mighty..." Qing'er looked at the wooden hut. Sword. Yi Xian was puzzled. At this moment the wooden door suddenly opened and a sword slowly floated out. Seeing this sword Yi Xian was stunned. The Azure Profound Sword. Yi Xian opened his palm and the Qingxian sword flew into his hand. The Qingxian sword didn't look much different from before, but there was an additional word on the hilt. Human. Humans. To the side Qing'er frowned. "Just one word. Don't you have 6? As soon as she finished speaking she opened her palm, and the walking sword suddenly appeared in her hand. Boom. All of a sudden, a terrifying pressure enveloped the entire mountain. In front of the wooden house, the puppy began to tremble violently, terrified to the extreme. At this moment, a sigh came from the wooden house. His strength is on the weak side so he can't control the 6-syllable Sanskrit. Currently he can't even control the smallest word, human. Tianming stared at the wooden hut in silence. The voice continued, I know you want to kill me, but you should know that from the beginning until now, I haven't done anything to let you and your sister down. Tianming stared at the wooden house for a long time before pulling Yi Xian's hand and leaving. Back then you gave my brother a chance to live. Today I'll spare your life. Clear. Soon the siblings disappeared into the distance. A long time later, another sigh came from inside the wooden house. I'm really not doing well. A moment later the wooden house's door opened. A man walked out and gently stroked the puppy, then smiled. Ah Huang, let's go. With that he walked into the distance. Qing'er brought Yi Xian to the seaside and the siblings strolled slowly. Qing'er whispered, Brother, you should go back. Yi Xian stopped and looked at Qing'er. Are you leaving? Qing'er nodded. Yi Xian asked, Where to? Qing'er smiled and said nothing. Yi Xian rolled his eyes at Qing'er. Fine. I won't ask. Qing'er suddenly hugged Yi Xian, resting her head on Yi Xian's chest. Brother, I'll wait for you at the end of the martial path. Don't make me wait too long. It's lonely. Yi Xian smiled. Of course. Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. I believe in you. With that she opened her palm and Xiao Ta appeared. She handed Xiao Ta to Yi Xian. I've modified this pagoda. Keep it. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ta and smiled. Xiao Ta, long time no see. Xiao Ta didn't answer. Qing'er frowned. Xiao Ta quickly said, Master, I missed you so much. Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Ta was too hypocritical. Qing'er smiled. Brother, let's go back. Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly asked, Qing'er, I have a girl by my side. Her name is Xianxia. Do you know her background? Qing'er nodded. I do. Yi Xian quickly asked, She is. Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. For you, she protected the third dimension and suppressed the fourth dimension. Since the birth of the universe, only one person could reach my level in swordsmanship. It's her. With that she paused. But it's just a possibility. Yi Xian was shocked. To reach Qing'er's level? It's possible. Yi Xian had to admit that he was really shocked. It should be known that Qing'er never put anyone in her eyes. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian's pupils shrank. He said with a trembling voice, She is you. Qing'er shook her head. I used to be her. Yi Xian was speechless. Qing'er said softly, Treat her well. She used to be very bitter. She lived like a year for hundreds of thousands of years. That kind of loneliness and suffering. Then she shook her head and didn't continue. Yi Xian nodded. I will. Qing'er waved her right hand. Yi Xian's body became illusory. He disappeared from the place. After Yi Xian disappeared, Qing'er's expression became cold. She looked up at the sky. Her eyes were as cold as ice. At this time Qing'er retracted her gaze and turned to look not far away. There stood a little girl. It was Arya. Little White was on her shoulder. Seeing Qing'er's gaze, Arya's eyelids twitched. Wasn't she very gentle just now? Why did she change so quickly? Little White blinked and waved its little paws. No one knew what it was trying to express. Qing'er looked at Arya and didn't speak. Arya hesitated, then said, I'm just passing by. Then she turned and ran away. Not long after, Yi Xian returned to Guanxian Academy. After returning to the academy, Yi Xian looked at the Qingxian sword in his hand. The word human on the hilt was very conspicuous. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Brother Bai, can you say this word? Daoist said, the word human of the 6-syllable Sanskrit mantra. This word has an extremely terrifying power of the human world. It's the same as your power of the human world. This word is condensed by countless predecessors. It's sincere and benevolent. Only a benevolent and righteous person can activate this word. Master gave this word to you. Obviously, Master approves of what you're going to do now. The power of the human world. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly activated the Qingxian sword. The Qingxian sword suddenly let out a sword cry. The next moment, the word human on the hilt suddenly trembled. Soon, an extremely terrifying power flowed into the Qingxian sword. Yi Xian's pupils suddenly shrank. At this moment he felt like his body was about to collapse. He was shocked and quickly stopped. The terrifying power instantly dispersed like a tide. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. He looked at the Qingxian sword in his hand with eyes full of disbelief. This, Daoist said, The power of the human world that you activated just now was less than 10%. Now you can't even control 10% of the power of the human world. Yi Xian looked at the Xianxia sword in his hand. He was still shocked. The power of this word was so terrifying. Moreover, this word was the weakest word in the 6-syllable Sanskrit mantra. One could imagine how terrifying the remaining 5 words were. Yi Xian sighed softly. He still had a long way to go. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian gently waved the Xianxia sword. He was overjoyed because he found that the Xianxia sword's previous functions were still there. Moreover, it had become even more terrifying. With the Xianxia sword he could travel freely in the universe again, ignoring all the obstacles in the universe. In addition, he also found that the Xianxia sword seemed to have become sharper. Thinking of this, he held the sword and slashed at his body. With this slash, a shallow sword mark appeared on Arya's armor. It hurt. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was instantly excited. Even Arya's armor could be hurt. Then what else in this world couldn't be broken by the Xianxia sword? The best defensive equipment and the best defensive equipment were in his hands. Thinking of this, Yi Xian couldn't help but laugh. The feeling of invincibility was back. As soon as this thought arose, Yi Xian became vigilant. He couldn't have this kind of thought. Usually when he had this kind of thought he would be beaten up in less than 3 days. He had to keep a low profile. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian opened his palm. Xiao Ta appeared in his hand. He smiled and said, "Xiao Ta, long time no see." Xiao Ta said, "Young lord, can I say something from the bottom of my heart?" Yi Xian nodded. "Of course, I've always been a democratic person." After a moment of silence, Xiao Ta said, "Young lord, to say something that might not be too modest, I'm now the real #1 tower in the universe. I think it's a bit of a waste of talent for me to follow you." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "A little." Xiao Ta said seriously, "Young lord, have you heard of a saying?" Yi Xian was a bit curious. "What saying?" Xiao Ta said, "In the Milky Way there's a saying that goes, invincibility depends on the 3 swords, and those who fall under the 3 swords depend on Xiao Ta." Yi Xian, did Daoist, Xiao Hun. P.S. Sorry, today's update is late. I don't want to explain, everyone scold me. Chapter 2364. Invincibility depends on the 3 swords and the 3 swords depends on Xiao Ta. Hearing Xiao Ta's words, Yi Xian was silent. This Xiao Ta was really arrogant. And not just ordinary arrogance. Of course he still understood. Not to mention Xiao Ta, even if he followed Qing or for a period of time he would feel that everyone in this world were ants. At this moment Xiao Ta said again, "Young master, my current idea is to establish my own sect." Establish my own sect. Xiao Hun couldn't help but say, "Xiao Ta, you don't do this." Xiao Ta said indifferently, "I also don't want to be so arrogant, but my strength doesn't allow me to." Xiao Hun, Xiao Ta said again, "Young master, in order to prevent you from thinking that I'm showing off, we can spar, a friendly spar. Don't worry, for the sake of master and sister Tianming, I won't kill you. Spar." Yi Xian smiled and said, "We can spar." Xiao Ta said, "Let's change places?" Yi Xian nodded, "Okay." As soon as he said that, he disappeared with Xiao Ta. The next moment he and Xiao Ta appeared in an unknown galaxy. Yi Xian looked around, then smiled and said, "Xiao Ta, I can use Xiao Hun to hit you, is that okay?" Xiao Ta laughed, "I'm invincible, you can do as you please." Yi Xian, did Daoist's voice suddenly sounded, "I've never seen such an arrogant tower. What the hell is this?" Xiao Ta smiled disdainfully, "A lousy pen dares to judge me, what a joke. Whether it's a person or an object, the most lamentable thing is that you don't know what you're doing, which is ignorance. You ignorant Daoist, do you know who I am? Tower, the #1 tower in the universe. First there was me, Xiao Ta, then there will be heaven, do you understand?" Yi Xian, F***CK. Did Daoist couldn't help but say, "First you, then the heavens? Are you crazy?" Xiao Ta said indifferently, "Ignorant. Did Daoist?" At the side, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "Xiao Ta, can we start now?" Xiao Ta said, "Little lord, you attack first. Because I'm afraid that if I attack first, you won't have the chance to attack." Yi Xian laughed. "Alright." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly leaped up and opened his palm, causing the azure sword to appear in his hand. In the next moment, a terrifying force swept out from within his body as Yi Xian raised his sword. The space-time in front of Yi Xian split apart. In the blink of an eye, Yi Xian appeared in a universe. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ta, who was in the current universe. With a thought, for streaks of sword gleams slashed at Xiao Ta's body. Instant invincibility. Moreover, it was the instant invincibility performed by the Azure Sword. Yi Xian could be said to have given his all in this attack. In the current world, the moment the 4 streaks of sword gleam appeared, Xiao Ta was instantly shocked. Faster thief! Faster thief! In the next moment, boom. With Xiao Ta as the center, everything within a perimeter was destroyed. Tens of millions of miles of starfields were destroyed with one sword. Fortunately, this was a dead starfield. Otherwise, who knew how many living beings would have been killed? Crack. At this moment, a cracking sound was suddenly heard in the field. Around Xiao Ta, more and more cracks appeared. In the blink of an eye, the entire Xiao Ta's body was covered in cracks. It was extremely terrifying. At this moment, Yi Xian appeared in front of Xiao Ta. Xiao Ta's voice trembled as he said, "Young lord, you're really serious?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Xiao Ta, I'm very sorry. I didn't expect you to be so fragile. Fortunately, because I only used 20% of my strength. If I used a few more percent, Xiao Ta, you would..." At this point he didn't continue speaking. Xiao Ta. Yi Xian walked in front of Xiao Ta and looked at Xiao Ta, who was covered in cracks. He sighed softly and said, "Xiao Ta, why are you so weak?" Xiao Ta. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. "Sigh, I respect your thoughts. You should go and establish your own sect. After all, if you follow me now, it doesn't seem to be of much use. Take care." After speaking, he turned and left. In the same place, Xiao Ta hesitated for a moment and then said, "Young lord, I was actually just joking just now. Yi Xian had already disappeared into the distance. Xiao Ta. Yi Xian returned to Guanxian Academy. He lay on a chair, crossed his legs and read a book. During this period of time he liked reading more and more. Because every time he read, his heart could quickly calm down. He liked this kind of quiet state of himself. At this time Little Soul suddenly said, "Young lord, Xiao Ta is very arrogant. But he doesn't have bad intentions." Little Soul still didn't want Yi Xian to give up on Xiao Ta. Because she and Xiao Ta had known each other for a long time and could be regarded as true friends. Although Xiao Ta was very arrogant most of the time, hearing Little Soul's words, Yi Xian put down the ancient book in his hand and said with a smile, "I know." Little Soul giggled, "Young lord deliberately hid it, right?" Yi Xian glanced at the Xianxia sword and said with a smile, "Little Soul, you've become smarter now." Little Soul said, "Young lord, I actually miss you. And Xiao Ta, he often talks about you in the Milky Way. In short, it's really good to be able to see you." Yi Xian smiled slightly, "I'm also very happy to be able to see all of you." Naturally, he was not angry with Xiao Ta. Xiao Ta and he had gone through life and death together so many times. Why would he be angry with Xiao Ta over such a small matter? At this time Xianxia came from the side. She walked to Yi Xian's side and then handed the tea in her hand to Yi Xian. She smiled slightly, "Brother, have some tea." "Brother." "Not brother, young lord." Yi Xian glanced at Xianxia. He smiled slightly and then he stood up and said softly, "Sit next to me." Xianxia nodded and then she sat next to Yi Xian. She naturally hugged Yi Xian's arms. Yi Xian smiled lightly, "Little girl, are you tired recently?" Xianxia shook her head, "Not tired." Yi Xian turned to look at Xianxia. Xianxia blinked, "What's wrong?" Yi Xian smiled slightly, "You've actually reached the ancient god realm." The corners of Xianxia's mouth curled up slightly. "Is it amazing?" Yi Xian said seriously, "Very." A brilliant smile appeared on Xianxia's face. She was extremely happy. Yi Xian gently rubbed Xianxia's head and said with a smile, "When will you reach the ancestor god realm?" Xianxia blinked, "I'm not telling you." Yi Xian rolled his eyes. Xianxia giggled and then she stood up, "Brother, I'm going to work." After saying that, she turned around and skipped into the distance. She was very happy. Looking at Xianxia in the distance, a complicated look flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. "Qing-oh." After saying that, he slowly closed his eyes. He would never allow the tragedy of the past to happen again. Everyone must live well. At this time Xiao Ta appeared beside Yi Xian. Xiao Ta hesitated and then said, "Young lord." Yi Xian smiled, then opened his palm and Xiao Ta flew into his hand. "Xiao Ta, did you have fun in the Milky Way?" Xiao Ta hurriedly said, "Yes, the Milky Way is very fun. An area in Xiaobai." Area always likes to provoke Sister Tianming, so she gets beaten every day. Yi Xian laughed. In fact, he was a little regretful in this trip to the Milky Way because he didn't get to see the Milky Way, let alone see Area and Xiaobai. He still missed Area and Xiaobai very much. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Brother Bai, why doesn't your master allow outsiders to enter the Milky Way? After a moment of silence, Daoist said, the Milky Way's martial arts civilization is very low. If outsiders enter it, it will pose a great threat to that world. Therefore, Master set up a restriction to prevent any cultivators from entering the Milky Way until... Yi Xian smiled and said, until Area and Xiaobai arrive there, right? Daoist said, yes, now the Milky Way is gradually connected with the outside world. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, sigh. Yi Xian smiled slightly. Don't worry, in the future I will protect the Milky Way. Daoist. Yi Xian laughed, then looked up into the depths of the starry sky. Counting my fingers, the people of the clan should be arriving soon. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly retracted his gaze. He looked at the door in the distance. There a young man slowly walked over. Yi Xian glanced at the young man, smiled and said, from the clan? The young man walked in front of Yi Xian, smiled and said, let me introduce myself, I am the 7th young master of the clan. 7th young master. Yi Xian nodded slightly. So it is the 7th young master, I have heard a lot about you. A trace of surprise flashed in the 7th young master's eyes. You know me? Yi Xian smiled and said, I have heard of you. The 7th young master was a bit interested. Where have you heard of me? Yi Xian was speechless. You idiot, I was just being polite, why are you asking so many questions? Yi Xian smiled slightly. Previously the 9th young master said, there is only one person in the clan who can threaten his prince position. And that is you, the 7th young master. You are like jade, the 7th young master is unparalleled. The 7th young master laughed. This 9th younger brother of mine, although he is a bit useless, he is still a very honest person. Having said that, he sat in front of Yi Xian, then smiled and said, Yi Xian, I have investigated you. I know that there are 2 mysterious swordsmen behind you. One is the man in green, the other is a woman in a plain dress, am I right? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. The 7th young master smiled and said, these 2 people are your biggest support, am I right? Yi Xian thought about it, then honestly said, no problem. The 7th young master stared at Yi Xian. I want to see them. Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. The 7th young master smiled slightly. You look very shocked, I will say it again, I want to see them. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, you are the one the clan sent to deal with me? The 7th young master nodded. Yes. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth slightly raised. Good. The 7th young master frowned. Good what? Yi Xian blinked, smiled and said, I like enemies like you the most. Chapter 2365. Haha. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the 7th young master suddenly laughed. Seeing the 7th young master laughing, Yi Xian's expression was calm as he gently drank the spiritual tea Qing Qiu brought him. Kill him directly? Of course he could do it. However, this was too boring. Because if he killed the 7th young master directly, the clan would not let it go. On the contrary, they would send more powerful enemies. Since that was the case, he could kill the person in front of him slowly to buy more time for himself. This way, he could avoid the situation where he couldn't be handsome for more than 3 days. At this time, the 7th young master shook his head and smiled. Young Master Yi, are you looking down on me? Yi Xian sternly said. No, on the contrary, I respect the 7th young master very much. The 7th young master looked at Yi Xian. Why? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then smiled and said, because the 7th young master has the bearing of a young master from a large clan. The clan's strength is 100 times stronger than mine, but the 7th young master didn't act arrogantly when he came here, unlike the 9th young master, whose every movement exuded an air of superiority. But the 7th young master is different. The 7th young master's bearing is extraordinary, amiable and approachable. In my heart he is the young master of a large clan. Even if I die in the hands of the 7th young master, I, Yi Xian, will have no complaints or regrets. The 7th young master laughed. Yi Xian, you may be a little weak, but you are quite an honest person. It's a pity that you offended the heavenly prestige of my clan. Otherwise, I would have accepted you as a guest and brought you to my clan. Yi Xian sighed. If the one I met that day was the 7th young master, I, Yi Xian, would not have made the same mistake again. As he said this, his expression suddenly became angry. Seventh young master, tell me, if you met someone like the ninth young master, you wouldn't be able to kill him? Wouldn't be able to kill him? The seventh young master nodded slightly. That ninth brother of mine is indeed not a good person. Ninth young master was speechless. Xian nodded. Seventh young master, even though I've killed ninth young master, I bear no ill will towards the main clan. The main clan is one of the largest clans in the world. Even if I was given 10 guts, I wouldn't dare to go against the main clan. If it wasn't for that ninth young master going too far, why would I, Xian, have the intention to kill him? The seventh young master sighed in a low voice. Xian, I sympathize with your experience. After all, that ninth brother of mine is indeed a good-for-nothing. Not to mention you, even I wanted to kill him back in the clan. Perhaps you don't know this, but in the clan, aside from my second sister, he doesn't care about anyone else. Moreover, he often humiliates me in front of my face, saying that I'm a pig with a human head and an idiot. When he spoke up to hear, a wisp of ruthlessness flashed through his eyes. Such people deserve to die. Xian quickly nodded. Death is not to be regretted. The seventh young master looked at Xian. This time the clan has given me a mission to kill you and wipe out 10 of your clans. Xian was silent. The seventh young master suddenly said, I was going to do the same, but after coming here, I feel that you're a very honest person. You're a good person, so I've decided to give you a way out. I want to bring you back to the clan. If I bring you back, I can report to the clan and you can avoid the disaster of wiping out 10 clans. What do you think? Xian thought for a moment and then said, if I go back with you, will the clan kill me? The seventh young master nodded. They should. Xian was silent. The seventh young master looked at Xian. My clan's strength is beyond your imagination. If you don't go back with me, then my clan will slaughter this world and everyone related to you. At that time, it won't be just you who will die, but every living being in this universe. After a moment of silence, Xian said, I'll go back with you. The seventh young master nodded. Then let's go. Xian smiled. All right. He left just like that. Xian followed the seventh young master and arrived at an expanse of the starry sky. In this expanse of the starry sky, Xian saw 36 ancient god realm experts. 36 of them. Xian shook his head and smiled. This clan really does have the ability to be domineering. All 36 of them were stunned when they saw Xian. The seventh young master's expression was calm. Let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, all of them started to travel through space. The clan actually had teleportation formations all over the universe. However, this place was truly too far away from the clan, so they had to travel through space first. On the way, the seventh young master glanced at Xian, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He didn't kill Xian because he had his own plans. The ninth young master came to find Xian, but not only did he not get rid of Xian, he was even killed by Xian. However, he was able to bring Xian back to the clan with just a few words. This would definitely make the patriarch and the elders think highly of him. At the side, Xian closed his eyes. The reason why he agreed to go to the clan was naturally because he didn't want the battlefield to be in the universe of gods. If they fought there, the entire universe of gods would not be spared. Therefore he decided to go to the clan. Xian suddenly sighed. This trip to the clan would probably be filled with fighting and killing again. He had to admit that he was already tired of this kind of fighting and killing. Wasn't it good for everyone to develop peacefully? But how could life always be smooth sailing? The seventh young master suddenly said, Young Master Yi, why are you sighing? Xian smiled and said, I'm afraid of death. The seventh young master was slightly stunned, then he laughed. Young Master Yi, you're really interesting. If we weren't enemies, I would be willing to be friends with you. Xian was speechless. The seventh young master shook his head. Unfortunately, you've killed someone from my clan. My clan will definitely not let you off. Don't worry, I can't guarantee anything else, but I can guarantee that my clan will definitely not harm that cosmos or your kin. Xian glanced at the seventh young master and said with a smile, All right. The seventh young master looked into the distance and slowly closed his eyes. He didn't know what his words today would bring him. At this moment, a woman suddenly appeared in front of everyone. The moment she appeared, a terrifying force directly suppressed everyone present. Xian frowned slightly as he looked at the woman. She wore a long white dress, had shoulder-length hair and eyes as clear as water. She held an ancient scroll in her hand. The seventh young master was slightly stunned when he saw this woman, then his expression turned ugly. Second sister. The second young miss of the clan, Zhou Bai. Zhou Bai glanced at Zhou Xian and then she said, "Leave him to me." The seventh young master was slightly stunned, and then he spoke in a low voice, "Second sister, he's my..." Zhou Bai gazed at the seventh young master. "Is there something wrong with you?" The seventh young master's expression instantly changed and he hurriedly said, "Second sister. I'm fine." Zhou Bai nodded slightly. "Report back and say that I took him away. I'll give everyone an explanation then." The seventh young master was slightly hesitant. Zhou Bai's expression was calm. "Little seventh, I remember that I haven't guided you in a very long time. Why don't I guide you now?" The seventh young master immediately said, "No. Big sister, I'll report back right now." As soon as he finished speaking, he led the 36 people behind him and vanished into the distance. They ran very quickly. Zhou Bai walked over to Zhou Xian and then she gazed at Zhou Xian. "Shall we go somewhere else to talk?" Zhou Xian nodded. "All right." Zhou Bai waved her right hand and in the next moment, the two of them vanished on the spot. When they reappeared, they were already at the peak of a mountain. From this position, the mountains in the distance were connected to each other, and the peaks of the mountains were shrouded in clouds and mist. It was like a paradise. Zhou Bai suddenly said, "With young Master Ye's strength, killing them should be a piece of cake, but young Master Yi wants to go with them to the clan." As she spoke up to this point, she turned to look at Zhou Xian. "Young Master Yi, do you not want to fight in the universe of gods, or do you want to destroy the clan? Or both?" Zhou Xian smiled. "How should I address you, miss?" Zhou Bai looked at Zhou Xian. "Zhou Bai." Zhou Xian shook his head and smiled. "Miss Zhou Bai, I'm only at the ancient god realm. I'm not as powerful as you say." Zhou Bai shook her head. "Young Master Yi, you should be more powerful than I say." Zhou Xian smiled. "Miss Zhou Bai, did you bring me here to have a chat with me?" Zhou Bai looked at Zhou Xian. "I'm here to stop you from going to the clan." Zhou Xian frowned. "Why?" Zhou Bai stared at Zhou Xian. "If you go to the clan, you will have to fight to the death. If my clan kills you, there will be a disaster." Zhou Xian was silent. Zhou Bai continued. "If my clan can't find someone, then he must be someone much stronger than my clan. Moreover, there are two possibilities for young Master Yi to make Daoist follow him. First, young Master Yi has obtained Daoist's recognition. Second, Daoist was forced to follow young Master Yi. Regardless of the reason, it's not something my clan can afford to offend. My clan naturally isn't afraid of Daoist's clone, but Daoist's real body isn't something my clan can contend against. And if Daoist is forced to follow young Master Yi, then it means that the person behind young Master Yi is stronger than Daoist. My clan can't afford to offend him." Zhou Xian glanced at Zhou Bai but didn't say anything. Zhou Bai turned her head and looked into the distance, softly saying, "Young Master Yi, I was born in the clan but I'm a girl. Therefore I have no fate to inherit the clan's position. Of course, it's also because I never had any thoughts about that position. I had already left, not wanting to interfere with the clan's matters. But in the end I couldn't let it go. After all, the clan gave birth to me and raised me. I can't resent them just because they didn't let me be the clan head. Of course, I also know that the clan is like the sun in the sky right now. They don't care about anyone." As she spoke, she looked at Zhou Xian and said seriously, "Young Master Yi, my clan controls hundreds of large and small universes. There are trillions of living beings that rely on my clan to survive. Now, my clan is muddle-headed and can harm trillions of living beings with a single thought. May I be so bold as to ask young Master Yi to give me some time? Let me mediate the grievances between young Master Yi and my clan." As she spoke, she bowed deeply. Zhou Xian was silent. Zhou Bai continued, "This matter is my clan's fault. This calamity started because of my clan, but the trillions of living beings aren't at fault. The leaders are muddle-headed and the ones suffering are the common people. Today, if young Master Yi goes to the clan, my clan will definitely be exterminated. All living beings under my clan will be consigned to eternal damnation." With that, she bowed deeply once more. "Young Master Yi, please give me a chance. Give my clan a chance. Give all living beings under my clan a chance." After a moment of silence, Zhou Xian said, "All right." Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, a strand of sword intent suddenly shot into the sky from within his body. Mortal realm sword intent. This sword intent of the mortal world pierced through the clouds, and in an instant the entire galaxy trembled. His sword intent had reached the ancient god realm. Moreover, there was another strand of sword intent within this strand of sword intent. Good. The sword will of the human realm contained the path of kindness. A good thought can cross thousands of mountains and rivers. P.S. Casting a monthly vote is also a good deed. 7017K.